Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting on the 21st of May, 2018. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk has read that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you're speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date nor planned for a future agenda. And today is an open mic night. Will the clerk please call the first item of business?
Yes, and just a reminder, we would request those giving testimony to please clearly state your name and address and to sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. Our first item of business is our hazmat appeal, hazardous materials cleanup fee for JTT Investments Services appeal.
Good evening. My name is Trent Floodman, 648 North 31st Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68347.
Elizabeth Elliott from the City Attorney's Office.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to appeal my the bill that I received on June 7th, 2016. I own a building at 640 South 17th Street. It's a 36-unit apartment complex. I'm going to give you the accounts from me and also my maintenance man that I was present also. I was at my office. It was like 4:30. I heard, we happened to at my office listen to the scanner, the police scanner. I hear a call come over that there was a smell of gas at one of my apartments, and so I instantly called my maintenance man. I was like, hey, just get over there. They smell gas. I'm sure the fire department will be over there. Immediately he headed over there. Within 5 minutes or so, I got a call from the at my office from the dispatch saying, hey, there was that. And I informed him right away. I have a maintenance man on their way that will be helping them. And I could not leave my office because it was open till 5 o'clock and I had people in there. So he was on his way. When he got there, they had already cleared out the building. They had already started ventilation. And he wanted to start cleaning up, and the fire departments and the chiefs and whoever, and I apologize, I don't have names, but I believe is the head of the hazmat. We're saying back and forth of, what they need to do, or they need to tear, at this time he's like, we need to tear up the carpet, or we need to get something on it. At that point, my maintenance man overheard, and this is 20 minutes to 30 minutes into it. He's standing with one of the fire chiefs, and on his walkie-talkie, he hears the head of hazmat, I believe, say, you know what? I don't have time for this. It's my daughter's birthday tonight. We got to get going. Rip up the carpet. Well. And again, at this time, my maintenance man's, I told him, we'll rip it up. That's fine. I had an additional maintenance man on his way, 10 minutes away, to help tear up the carpet, get everything out of there, and get rid of it. Well, he also said to him at that time, to my maintenance man, we either tear up the carpet now, or you have to put up everybody in the hotel room for the night. Well, as I have further learned, that is not people's, if they have insurance, or if somebody would have had insurance, they would, renter's insurance would have covered those. That wouldn't have been on me. So he came from a sense of urgency of like, you're doing this now or else fine, you're going to cost you thousands of dollars in hotel rooms. That's, I don't believe is the case. The additional thing is the person who did it, and what it was probably less than a gallon of gas. A gentleman, a tenant of mine, Richard Apland, had one of those bicycles with the motors on it that has the little gas can on it. When he took it up to his apartment, gas leaked out on the carpet, and is where this came from. Well, so it wasn't gallons and gallons of gas. It was just a little trickle of gas up that. And I, understanding of the safety and, of this and everything. But my point is there was multiple ways of getting rid of the gas smell other than just ripping up the carpet. We could have, vinegar and baking soda and water is a known effect. I mean, from the internet of getting rid of gas smell, of doing it in a, quick time. Worst case scenario, I could have. So he kind of gave unnecessary, urgency to the matter because there was nobody in harm's way. It wasn't enough. There was no chances of any fires or anything. It was just more of the fumes, and I understand that. I am sympathetic for the his
1 minute.
Okay, for the fire chiefs, having a daughter's birthday or whatever. But I kind of feel like, it's the bill was $2,300 to have them tear up the carpet and do this. My guys could have done it. My exemplary cost of spending another $2,500, $3,000 to recarpet it, redo it all. I just feel like is a little excessive, and that there's other things, or possibly, and honestly, I didn't do it. So that Richard Apland, who is the tenant there, he was responsible for it. There's multiple reasons I don't feel that it's my responsibility, or the hazmat did not need to do what they did. I could have handled it very easily. And also the time, they were only there an hour and a half. They said they were there 6 hours. Even on their reports, it says they got there at 19:48, which is, they couldn't have, because I was there at 4:30 and my office closes at 5. And then that they were there for 2 hours. My maintenance man was there an hour and a half. He was there from 10 minutes after it, and he left an hour and a half later, and he was the last one there.
All right.
Thank you.
Are there questions? Jane?
Yes.
How many individuals from the hazmat team helped to tear out the carpet?
I'm not privy to that. I know there was, 5, 6 of them. I know they had multiple trucks there, and ventilating and stuff like that. But they were, and I understand, I appreciate the urgency of the gas smell, but it was pretty quickly evident that it was, not a fire risk. Sorry.
Other questions? John?
A moment ago, you mentioned the time of 1938, which would be like 5:38, and you said they couldn't have gotten there. Did you get that confused? You said you would leave work at 5?
Well, no, the original, they show that the original call came in at 4, I came in at least 4:15 to 4:30, and it was at 1926. So, that would be 1626. And they show that they were en route at 1926, and so I think their timing, was off a little bit on the report, is what I was.
So they're saying 7:30. Roughly.
Yeah, and my guy was, he left the complex, and he was the last one there because he wanted to make sure everything was locked up, the doors and everything was secured. That he had to secure the floors because he had to mop the floors. He went over and mopped all the floors, made sure everything was in orderly shape, and he left at 6 o'clock.
Jane?
I guess for Liz, or were you going to go over some of the costs?
I will just hit on a few of those, especially the questions that council members had. The dispatch records that we have show that the call was out on 19 hours, 25 minutes, so 7:25 p.m. is our records. There were 6 units that did respond. All 6 units were there about 2 hours. One was 1 hour, 59 seconds. One was 2 hours and 5 minutes. Another one was 2 hours and 6 minutes. The 6 hours, the initial hazmat bill covers the first hour for all the units. That's where the $1,316 comes from. The second, any hours over that first additional hour, those are additional charges. So that's where the additional 6 hours comes from in that. This was a call that both fire department, hazmat team, and the health department both responded to. They did do some, they had suppression, ventilation, monitoring, and command all set up. Because it was an apartment building, they did have to make sure the building was evacuated. The VOC levels at the time were reading 50 parts per million. According to the health department, the allowable level is 1 parts per million. So there was quite a bit of the noxious fumes emitting throughout the apartment building, especially on that floor. So that was part of the urgency. We have a number of apartments that had to be evacuated. People are outside waiting. It's the evening hours, and the VOC levels were quite high for an incident like this. I do believe it was, only a few gallons. It was a bicycle converted into a motorbike, so it did have a small gas tank there. That's where it came from. This is not a call where the fire department can just be like, oh, the VOC levels are high, but you're here and you promised to clean it up, we're gonna go now. This is something that even if the maintenance gentleman was going to clean it up, fire would have to stay around, health department would have to stay around and ensure that the levels did come back down to the appropriate and acceptable levels of the 1 parts per million. So that is part of it, and that's why it took 2 hours, was to make sure those levels came down. Before they did release it, they finally did get levels down to 2 parts per million before they released the property back at that point and allowed the residents back into their homes. So that's where the 6 hours and the work and the bill comes from.
So they're actually being charged for each one of the units that had to be on site?
Yes, each unit of hour that they were there. Yes.
Okay, John?
Yes, could you explain the disparity between the 4:15 call and now you're looking at 7:30?
That's when they went back.
And that, I'm not sure. I guess I did not pull the dispatch call records to verify. Typically, they come across automatically. So all of our records show that it was 7:25 p.m. I'm not sure where the earlier hours comes from.
So 7:25 p.m. is when they left.
Is when they were called out to the apartment building.
And again, I mean, I know for a fact, because if it was 5 o'clock, I live out just outside of town, and I know for a fact that it was definitely at the very latest 4:30, because I was sitting at my desk and I heard it over, and just in the, I mean, would have never been there at 7 at that late of an hour.
Mr. Floodman, have
Yes.
you pursued any legal recourse with your tenant?
Well, and like I explained to Ms. Elliott there, is that, I'll be honest, these are very low-income people. And honestly, there would be no...
Okay. Do you or he have any insurance to cover this kind of thing?
I did that. I obviously have insurance, but I have a $5,000 deductible, so it wouldn't even hit this, and because I contacted my insurance company, and obviously being a small business owner, I have to, be diligent.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One quick rebuttal, or just one thing about one more, and I apologize, I thought I had, no, whatever. There was a couple things, again, that I think is that, I kind of reiterate of the, that he only gave 2 choices in the matter, right? Is either we tear it up, or you house, or you put everybody in a house, you put everybody in a hotel. I just feel like that was, there was many other options that we could have went through, or at least a few other options that never gave to us, because they just wanted, I feel that he wanted to get the situation done, which I understand. And my other thing is that they probably didn't need, in all essence, all those trucks there for the entire time. At best, they could have had one monitoring the levels.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, council members. Do you care to vote on this evening, or do you want to vote on it in our next
Quick, some
meeting?
more staff questions. Could,
Staff questions.
it looks like there's a gentleman from LFR who's leaving. Is that, were you, no? Were you here for this item? No. Okay, would you and Miss Elliott come up, please?
Okay, we're done with you, sir. This is staff questions. Yep.
Thank you. Could you just respond to the concern Mr. Floodman raised about having all the trucks on site for as long as they were there, given that they were charging, per unit?
Sure. Brad Davitt, Battalion Chief, Special Response, Lincoln Fire and Rescue. That is a Hazmat 2 standard response, is that for the risk profile. So even though this was fuel oil or a petroleum product that was spilled on a carpet, our risk profile is set up to handle anything from the cut gas lines that we see to fuels down the interstate or toxic chemicals, caustic chemicals, so on and so forth. So once they get on scene, the monitoring of that, and I believe it was a 3-story apartment complex, to go floor to floor with multiple monitors. Some of those individuals, the command and the support unit of those vehicles there, one was doing the ventilation, that was the truck company assigned. The hazmat crew was hazmat 14 and engine 2, both during a monitoring, and then assisting the other engine company for removing the carpet from, if I recall, the second floor and then taking it down the stairwell and out, as well as they then put plastic sheeting down, tacked it around the spot so it would not emit any gas until it was able to be dealt with or soaked in, or the maintenance supervisor did. And then after reading, because I was not, I apologize, not the command individual on location, is they will then work with the health department of what is a acceptable ideal H or level of VOCs in this case to allow the public back in the building. So according to this, it appears that the command battalion chief that was on location at that time felt he needed those assets, which could have been anywhere from just 15 individuals to 20, depending on staffing that day, if they were riding 3 or 4 to a rig, to accomplish carrying all the carpet down, cutting it up, continually monitoring and assisting individuals, as well as then ventilating at different areas of the floor to bring as fast as they could that VOC or that high level of concentration down.
Thank you. And then, would you review the recommendation that you made to the city council and the reasons, just so that we have that on the record?
Definitely. On this, during the time frame, the hazmat fees, response fees were outlined in Resolution 88561. At that time, the hazmat level 2 responses was $1,316. That covers the first hour of response for that. When it comes to hazmat, it comes down to the owner of the building and the responsibility that they have in maintaining a safe environment. This was a tenant of Mr. Floodman's building, and as the owner of the building and the ultimate responsible party of the building as a whole, and ultimately the tenants, we ultimately came back to Mr. Floodman. I don't believe, my recollection is that we did not submit a bill to the tenant because given that it was Mr. Floodman's building, his responsibility, it was his carpet that was damaged and ultimately had to be torn up. That's why the bill was submitted to him. It did, just like any other hazmat, whether it's a spill on the road or a gas line, expended a lot of fire department resources and required them to come out and monitor this for the safety of the community and those there. And so that's why we feel that the bill is appropriate. It does follow the fees that were set forth by the council at the time, and feel that it is appropriate.
Okay.
I will probably move we delay, but I guess while we're asking some questions, I'm a little confused here and concerned by the disparity in the comments of Mr. Floodman, times, comments made by fire personnel and so forth. And
With regards to the comments, the birthday party, I'm not aware of that. That's not been something that I have discovered during our investigation of this. I can't say that they weren't said, but I've not come across anyone who did say that. With regards to the timing, This did happen quite a while ago, almost 2 years ago to the day, June 7th of 2016. So I don't know if it's just the lapse of time. Our dispatch records do show that it was almost 7:30 at night when this was called out. I've never had a chance where the dispatch records were incorrect. They've always been correct time-wise. So I can't explain that discrepancy there, other than just lapse of memory during the 2 years.
And if I might add, sir, that the dispatch time of 1925 hours, 36 seconds, that is the CAD dispatch that is stamped at the dispatch center when the phone call comes in and obviously then goes out over the dispatch. The clearing time where they clear the call, 2125, that adds to that roughly approximately 2 hours to 2 hours and 5 minutes. That is a timestamp when the company officer then will select their MDT that they are back in service for another call. So the original timestamp of that approximately 7:25 at night comes out of the dispatch CAD, the automated CAD system that timestamp it. The other has the human proximity of hitting or letting dispatch know that you are in service for another call, and then it is timestamped at that time.
Okay, other questions?
Hi, Mr. Chair, thank you. So I am a little confused because I'm looking online at the documents and I'm seeing different addresses and different timestamps than you're talking about. And I don't know if if the link that's been given is just incorrect.
The address that should be up on the top of the Lincoln Fire and Rescue Incident Unit comment report should show 640 South 17th Street. Does it show that?
And so what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the hazmat level 2 response, and it says 4230 North 27th.
That would be the wrong address. I'm wondering if the wrong documents got it uploaded.
Okay, so that one is an $1,882 billing, and that has then a Lincoln Fire and Rescue Incident Report, which has a dispatch at 1820. That's the first one that I see on there, and then the next one, and so there's 2 appeals on here, which is why I was looking. So the next one is an appeal at a different address, same company, TCW.
Those were the appeals that were 2 weeks ago.
This is for 4230. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the same one. I'm sorry, what was,
The TCW, those 2 appeals were 2 weeks ago.
okay.
And then this one is for JTT, and the address of the call was 640 South 17th Street. So I'm wondering if the links got uploaded incorrectly.
And that's what I'm wondering too, because I'm not feeling like we have, like the appellant has some documents that, and including a narrative, and I don't feel like any of those. First, I thought perhaps I wrote the testifier's name down incorrectly. That's why I got back onto the documents, but I don't think we really even have the documents for
Yeah, we
this
do.
particular appeal.
Linked on the agenda, the online
Is-
agenda for today.
I'm sorry?
But there's only one, and it's for JTT. It's linked for today. I wonder if you hit
agenda.
refresh, if maybe it's,
So I'm on,
Well,
anyway.
I think John is going to make a
I'll
motion.
make a motion, we hold this over to our next meeting, and which will be 2 weeks, and then during that time, if we could clarify some of the things, and if you could talk with Mr. Floodman too, I don't know how much interaction you've had, and he also mentioned an employee of his or a maintenance person. We can get the facts out, so we handle this accordingly.
Okay.
second.
Thank you.
Sure.
And this is just for action only?
Action only.
For
Okay, moved by John, seconded by Cindy. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
All right, next is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 3.
Is there anyone who'd like to testify on any of these items? Okay,
All right, if not, we can vote on these items. Item 1A was introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion?
Yes. Yeah. These are our JBC Joint Budget Committee funding recommendations, and I just want to highlight that this is one of the ways that the city and the county work together to support nonprofits in our community that are providing emergency assistance and basic needs funding. This year, the allocation is just under 1.6 million, with some of the largest grants from the city and county being awarded to Cedars Youth Services, Friendship Home, the People's City Mission, Community Action Program, all for emergency shelter and emergency needs assistance. In addition to that, there are grants to Family Services and Centerpoint for behavioral health services, the Good Neighbor Community Center for food pantry and basic needs, Voices of Hope for crisis intervention and advocacy, and the Child Guidance Center for outpatient services, along with many other smaller grants to support other vital services. But it's important that the community understands that this does happen at the city and county level, that we do partner to try and amplify their efforts to assist Lincoln's most vulnerable.
Okay, other discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Items 1B and 2A and B were introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call item 4A, manager application of Shane Bauer for Granite City Food and Brewery at 6150 O Street. Hi, Shane. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Shane Bauer, 5542 Adams Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68504.
All right, Mr. Bauer, please tell us about your application.
I'm just looking to get approval for a liquor license for Granite City Food and Brewery. I've done this process once before. We opened up a new building. I ended up taking a step back for a second while we opened the new building, and then took over as a general manager again there. So reapplying for that liquor license.
All right. Any questions? Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Next is item 4B, application of Yo Java Inc., doing business as Mo Java Cafe and Roasting for the addition of a catering license to their Class I liquor license at 2649 North 48th Street, Suite D. I will note for the record, we do have a request from the applicant to withdraw this application, but if anyone is here to testify, they may do so.
Anyone? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 4C, manager application of Jessica Agayo for Walmart, store number 1943 at 4700 North 27th Street.
Hello.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Jessica Wyo. My address is 7349 North 17th Court in Lincoln, Nebraska, 68521. I'm applying for the liquor license for the North 27th Walmart store 1943 today.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is the manager application of Douglas Hank for Walmart store number 3278 at 8700 Andermatt Drive. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do, yes.
Thank you.
My name is Douglas Hank. Address is 5431 West Partridge Lane, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68528. I am the new store manager at the store at 8700 Andermatt Drive for Walmart, and just trying to get my name on the liquor license.
Okay, questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 4E, application of GNS Corporation doing business as Discount City for an additional area measuring approximately 60 feet by 29 feet at 5560 South 48th Street. I will note for the record that the applicant has submitted a request to withdraw this application.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney. We've got some confusion with the Liquor Commission regarding this particular application. We'd ask that you continue it to the next hearing so we can get it resolved, and then either ask it to be withdrawn or you can act on it at that point, rather than have it withdrawn and then they would have to reapply if it turns out they need to.
Mr. Kirkpatrick, would that be to
Yes.
our next meeting? You said next
It'll
hearing?
be the next meeting, June
Okay.
4th. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We were trying to get it clarified today, and we're unable to get a call back, so we'll have it resolved in the next few weeks.
All right, we'll entertain some motions.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would move approval of items 4A, 4C, and 4D.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Lyrian. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
And Mr. Chair, I would move to withdraw item 4B.
Second?
Moved by John, seconded by Cindy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
And Mr. Chair, I would move we continue to our next public hearing on June 4th, item 4E.
Second?
Moved by John, seconded by Cindy. Discussion?
Moving that with continued public
With
hearing.
continued public
Okay.
hearing and all that good stuff. All right, please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then are public hearing resolutions. I'll call item 5A, approving Stevo's Lounge as a Keno satellite located at 110 West Fletcher Avenue.
Members of the council, my name is Katrina Coffey. I'm with Big Red Keno. We're located at 11248 John Galt Boulevard. I'm here to ask for approval for the Keno application for CVOs.
Okay, questions?
Out of curiosity, since you're up before us again, can you give an update on about how many revenues that's generating for city purposes, and then how many sites you now have?
Okay, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I believe we have 48 of them, but I don't handle the sales. But I will get back to you. I'll find out tomorrow, and should I call the city clerk and let her know? Okay, that'd be
PR
fine.
for you
All right.
on the revenues that come about for good causes.
Great, okay.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next I'll call items 5B through D. Text Amendment 18005, amending Title III Design Standards for zoning regulations by amending Sections 6.1 and 6.3 of Chapter 3.100 Design Standards for outdoor lighting to allow private contractors to design and install city-owned streetlights, approving a contract between the city and Schneider Electric for the streetlight LED conversion project, and amending the fiscal year 17-18 CIP to authorize and appropriate $12,500,000 in other financing funds for the LED streetlight conversion project.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, fellow council members. I'm John Carlson with the Mayor's Office, and I'm here tonight as part of a team with Frank Ularic, who's the City Sustainability Administrator, Brandon Kaufman, the City Finance Director, Chris Conley, Chief Assistant City Attorney, and Peter Hinkle from Schneider Electric. And we're not all intending to testify tonight. They've tapped me to kind of give you an overview on the project, but everyone is then here available to answer questions. Got a little presentation, haven't timed it out, but I might need 1 extra minute in order to make the presentation. So I'll start us off. The LED conversion project, where we're proposing to do a comprehensive, rapid conversion of the streetlight system here in Lincoln. We'll start off by just backing up for a second and answering the question, why LED? We think there are 3 great answers to that. LED increases safety, LED reduces energy use, and LED is better for the environment. You know, as technology has advanced, obviously Lincoln has tried to take advantage of new technologies that provide improvements for the community at lower costs, and we think LED is exactly one of those. So increased safety, LEDs increase safety. If you take a look at these pictures, you can see on the left is the older high-pressure sodium vapor, the yellow kind of light that you see out in the community. On the right is a section that's been converted over to LED. You'll see right away with the LED, the higher visibility, the better color accuracy, better for drivers, better for pedestrians, safer for bicyclists when you're using the street. The LED, you may notice, also focuses more light down onto the road. If you look on the left, you see kind of the golden globe effect of those high-pressure sodiums with the curved glass. Whereas with the LEDs, again, you're focusing more of the light right down on the road where it belongs. I think this also is a demonstration of why phasing is less desirable, why we think the comprehensive changeover is better. It stops you from going from the patches of LED, patches of older technology, patches of LED, where you got the glare effect. LEDs obviously reduce energy. Everybody knows that who started to put some in their house. A little more expensive, but the LED payback is pretty impressive. Currently, a high-pressure sodium vapor here in the city of Lincoln, a typical arterial, uses 312 watts of energy. The LED replacement that we propose to put in produces the better, safer light, using only 108 watts of energy, so significant savings.
You're supposed to say, wait for it?
Yeah, wait for it. A little motion, a little excitement. So you multiply that times the 27,000 streetlights that are out there to be converted over, you're looking at over 10 million kilowatt hours in savings over a year. Very impressive. And that represents an annual savings of over $375,000. So I ask you to remember that number. We're going to circle back to it here in just a minute. LEDs also represent a great opportunity for reduced maintenance. Back to the high-pressure sodium bulb again. They typically last about 5 years. It's pretty good. But you think again about there's 27,000 of them out there of the older technology bulbs. We have crews out all day long, every day, changing bulbs, doing maintenance on all these bulbs that we have out there. In contrast, the LED replacement, the better light, 25 years. Much, much longer, much less maintenance. As a matter of fact, if you convert the street light system, you've basically eliminated the maintenance on the fixture itself. The fixture is all in one. The diodes, the circuit board, it all comes all in one. Certainly south of that, if you have a pole that needs to be painted, you may need some pole maintenance, the wiring, but the fixture itself virtually requires no maintenance at all, no bulb changing, none of that. And that represents an annual savings of over $495,000. So let's remember that number also. And thirdly, LEDs protect the environment. We've calculated that converting the streetlight system to LED gives you an annual reduction of about 4 million pounds of greenhouse gas emissions. Everybody likes equivalencies, we like them too. That's about the same as planting 180,000 trees, or using 700,000 less gallons of gas, or burning 3,500 less tons of coal. So very impactful, this changeover. What are we currently doing? Well, Lincoln right now has a very mixed portfolio of streetlights out there, high-pressure sodium, metal halide, mercury vapor, some LED, some older technologies. In 2016, I'm sure you all remember, we adopted a policy to replace the older inefficient lights with LEDs as the older fixtures fail. So we are doing conversion right now in a piecemeal version. Every year we approximately, since that time, we've calculated that, we currently convert about 1,350 older fixtures every year to LED. So you take that number and you calculate it across an industry average cost, conservatively, about $226 per fixture without including labor. And so we're already budgeting over $300,000 every year to convert to LED. So there's another potential funding stream of what we're already doing. However, if you do the math, 27,000 fixtures, 1,350 a year, at our current pace, we're on a schedule to take more than 20 years to convert to LED. Which naturally begs the question, why would we wait 20 years? Why would we wait 20 years to increase safety, save energy, reduce those maintenance costs, and protect the environment? We as a team, we know Lincoln can do better right now. So the proposition in front of you is this rapid and comprehensive streetlight plan to convert over those remaining 27,000 light fixtures to LED within the next 12 months. And in particular, to use a vehicle that's been created specifically to do these kinds of conversions, and that's an energy savings performance contract. Now, you can do those contracts in 1,000 different ways. We've worked together with the contractor to try and put together the package that we think works for Lincoln. With the energy savings performance contracts, the first step is you do the initial audit to look at the existing system, to look at the needs, to look at the uses, to put together a portfolio of different conversions and different fixtures, work together with city staff in order to figure out what's the best one for Lincoln. We've put that together. With the contract, too, you get the guaranteed design, procurement, construction, and commissioning costs. Those are built in. You know what your costs are, and they will not change or exceed. You get to buy the fixtures in bulk. You drive down the cost with the bulk purchasing power of those thousands of fixtures, and the annual energy and maintenance savings are going to be guaranteed in line with that initial analysis. We've got the fixtures. We've got fixtures for almost all of them. They're either exact replacements or analogous replacements for a majority of the streetlights. You do have some specialty ones that they've done work. With most of the specialty ones, there is an existing LED fixture that matches fixture for fixture or a really close equivalent that you can do. In a very few of them, we'll install an LED retrofit kit within the existing fixture, and in a very, very small where you have a historic fixture, we may actually put an LED bulb in a very tiny amount of them that have historic fixtures. The ESPC also talks about, in some of the ESPC contracts, they will include financing. For this particular project, what staff has put together is a package that says that we can finance by ourselves. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to borrow from city reserve accounts. So you know from your work in the budget that we have reserve accounts in the city that are typically invested. Right? We have to keep that money available for cash flow and for reserve funds, but it doesn't sit idly. We invest it in treasuries. We get a small interest rate for those funds. Our proposition is essentially to take those city savings that we have, use those to purchase the streetlights, and then pay our savings account back with an interest rate that would be equivalent to that what we would get from normally investing it. We're going to pay back those reserves. How are we going to pay them back? I'm going to circle back to those three funding streams that we just talked about. So how does the payback work? Well, as you know, we currently budget for the energy use that we have now, the maintenance costs that we have right now, and that conversion budget that we're doing right now. So you have your baseline. When you do the conversion, right, all of those costs will drop. The energy use will drop, maintenance costs will drop, and you won't have to do any more conversion. If you continue to budget, as you normally have, you'll have all three of those increments available to you to pay the savings back with interest. When you calculate those three numbers together, you get the number that's on the screen, a little over $1.1 million. When you compare that against the cost to install the system, a little over $12 million, you get a 10.4-year simple payback. We think 10 years to pay off streetlights infrastructure that will last over 25 years is an outstanding investment. If you think about it, after the 10.4 years when we've replenished our savings account with interest, then the community will continue to benefit from those energy and maintenance savings from year 11, 12, 13, all the way out for the life of the system. And the safety and the environmental benefits begin now. They begin once those fixtures are installed. So communities across the country are doing this. We don't claim to be the smartest people in the world or the newest people in the world, but what we do know is that this works. And it works for Lincoln, and we think we've put together a package that works for Lincoln. We think we can do better right now, and so what we're asking for you tonight is three things. Approval of the CIP amendment to put this conversion project into the capital improvements plan. We will point out that the staff report, as I'm sure you noticed, shows that both the comp plan and the Lincoln Environmental Action Plan call for this type of conversion to take place. And they also call for energy savings performance contracts to be looked at as the tool to do the conversion. Secondly is the design standard change, which allows a company other than LES to perform the changeover, but only to the LES approved standards. None of the standards are changing, none of that is changing. We work with LES on the project. This allows the outside contractor to do it in a rapid fashion on a big scale. And thirdly is the contract itself, which you have, which allows Schneider Electric then, formerly known as Square D, you may know them, to perform the deal. So I'll circle back again. We think this is a great project. It's not all about the payback. What it really is about is a benefit for the community, to increase safety, to reduce energy use, and to make improvements for the environment. So with that, we have the team available to answer the questions that you have.
Jane.
So John, could you tell us a little bit about the timeline? If we vote to approve it tonight, go through the timeline of when the contracts will be let out and when the process will take place.
Chris Connolly, City Law Department. If this contract is approved tonight, the project will begin very shortly. Frank can tell you about whatever steps are necessary to actually get it going, but we are expecting the project to be completed in a 9 to 12 month time frame.
Frank Ulrich, City Sustainability Administrator. I don't have much to add to that. That's, we'll have a kickoff meeting here in the next few weeks, but 9 to 12 months for the full deployment of the project.
Okay, John, then Lyrian.
I have 5 questions, real quickly here. What happens if there's obsolescence or a new and better slice of bread created in the next 25 years? And I say that because in the last 10 years, there have been 2 to 3 upgrades in electrical lighting.
I'm not sure that we can predict what will happen in the next 25 years. LED is the best available technology right now. We think and LED has come to the point where it's as efficient as it's going to get. But I haven't heard of the next generation beyond LED. This, in our minds, is the best technology and the best approach to take right now.
Will these heads be available to be retrofitted for solar power?
heads be available?
I mean, the light fixtures. I just got back from China, and they have solar panels on their streetlights.
I think quite possibly, as we've got the 7-pin connector, which can be adaptable to any type of retrofit or upgrade.
Question 2 is, in our previous public hearings, we talked, or you talked about 9.4 years payback on these. I believe this is looking at a 15-year contract. Can you explain why we can't do this in 9.4 years? And that way the city's guaranteed in a shorter time rather than 50% longer that this will meet the energy savings.
The 9.4 figure, well, we've kind of been back and forth on tweaking the savings, verifying the rates with LES. So we have vacillated a bit on that figure, but it's, our latest calculations as confirmed by LES, weighing in on that technical energy audit as well, is that we're at 10.4 years.
In the contract, I thought it said something about 15 years under the obligation of Schneider.
That's the way the cash flow right now is laid out for a 15-year period. That Brandon can speak to how we actually set that term up for the financing.
So if you have the 10.4 years, if the payback doesn't achieve by that point, then in this case, Schneider Industries would be on the hook to reimburse us?
Actually, Schneider is only guaranteeing under this contract the initial capital cost and the year one savings for energy maintenance and capital cost avoidance.
I had understood ESCO is guaranteed it over the life of the project so that if it didn't meet those, that the city would be held harmless.
There's a cost associated with multi-year guarantees, and really with LES and obviously the city council having certainly more control over what LES does to the maintenance rates as well as the energy rates. Schneider has no control over that. They can make some projections based on conservative estimates of what the increase in maintenance and or energy will be, but Schneider cannot guarantee what LES will charge us in out years.
Well, and that, I'll skip to my fourth question about LES. Have they signed off on this as far as the type of equipment, meeting the standards, and then also that they will be reducing their maintenance levels?
They have reviewed the technical energy audit. They made one tweak to one of the proposed luminaire series. We've adjusted that. It's, everything that's being installed is an LES approved luminaire.
Has LES also agreed on the maintenance costs going down?
That we can't, again, project. We've been very conservative in our estimate right now. Say, for instance, the LEDs are at $2.80. The projection is that LES, despite the fact that we think it should be lowered, are going to go to $3.32 in 2019 to cover all other costs associated with streetlight maintenance. We've acquiesced to that figure for purposes of the budget, but actually believe we can hold those costs even lower or consider other options.
But if LES wants the $3 a fixture in another year, why don't we know now? You're asking us to vote on a 10.4-year project that you say will pay back.
This is, LES can only project their maintenance and energy rates 5 years in advance until we come up in the fall for the rate resolution. I think they'll have a better handle on what they're actually going to propose, but I think we feel very adamantly that certainly the maintenance rate should hold very, very steady. What the energy rate, that's all part of their rate resolution model, and I can't tell you how that'll turn out.
What type of increased costs did you project when you looked at the maintenance levels? Because I don't think labor costs are going to be the same over the next 10 to 15 years.
I think we used a couple percent escalation every year. And
what's a couple percent?
I couldn't tell you what that figure is, Peter. 2.5. And is that for energy and maintenance? Energy and maintenance both are projected at 2.5% increase.
I suspect that our labor costs have gone up more than that per year just in these lean times. So.
There's been lots of discussion with LES about these costs. I mean, this is something that has been discussed for probably about the last 8 months, and everybody acknowledges that we're dealing with projections here, and so everyone's taken their best educated guess, including LES, as to what these maintenance costs, how much they're going to rise. And that's how this number of 332 is arrived at.
Rise or actually decrease, we're hopeful.
Okay, it just concerns me, we get a lot of proposals that say that. For example, we had the solar panels out at the 27th and Holdridge Lincoln Police Substation that haven't functioned for years. So, okay. Reserves, you're gonna borrow 12 million from our reserves. What happens if there's a burp in between? LES's maintenance costs go up, their labor charges double? Maybe this is for our finance director, but how do we pay back the reserves?
I'll leave that to Brandon.
Yeah, and the payback on the reserves is going to be derived from the savings from the energy and the maintenance and the avoidance of capital costs moving forward in the future. So, if we have that escalator, if we're holding our budget flat and all the savings come in, there should be an incremental cost moving forward with a budget increase, but that gap and the savings will go to pay back the funds that were borrowed.
So what if it doesn't meet it, that the maintenance costs do go up through other elements and so forth? The electric savings aren't there what you projected.
If at some point it doesn't meet it, then the general fund will have an obligation that it's due to pay to the funds that are borrowed from.
And one of the thoughts on the ESCO is that it puts the city out of the guarantee position, but actually we still are there then. Is that correct? We're guaranteeing your assumptions with the general fund.
And what is your question, John?
Well, I'm deducing from what you've said and what our finance director said, that if the projections don't pan out and the costs do go up on maintenance and so forth, we don't have as much savings. And as Brandon just said, then at that point, the general fund has to guarantee the shortfall.
That would be correct.
Okay. And then
That was 5.
I think that's my 5 questions.
Those are your 5 questions. Lyrian?
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions for you, Chris, about the document. The section 6.3 of the text amendment modifies language about replacing and maintaining. Is that because LES will still be the sole provider of those services? This is the section that allows an outside contractor to perform installation, but replacement and maintenance is crossed out.
That's correct.
That why?
There had been discussions about whether or not the city would do maintenance, and through negotiations, and they would prefer to continue to do the maintenance, and it made sense. And so they will continue to do the maintenance. What we wanted to achieve here, though, was to be able to have an outside contractor come in and do the installation. And to the extent that there's true design work, we needed to have that as well. And so that's the reason for the text change.
Is there other area of the text that acknowledges that LES is solely responsible for replacement and maintenance? Or
I can't remember. It seemed like there was some additional language maybe towards the end of that section that dealt with that, but it is our intent that LES will continue to do maintenance.
And then the CIP modification or amendment is just modifying the current year, 2017-2018, of the capital improvements program, correct?
I believe that's correct.
Because it's a 12-month, okay.
Yes.
And what happens if for some reason the timeline for completing the conversion does exceed 12 months? What would happen at that point?
Well, they'll just continue the process. We have expected this. They initially came in and believed that they could do this on a 9-month program, but as it's taken longer and concerns about getting into next winter, it got expanded out to 12 months. But we fully expect that they're going to complete the project, not only on schedule, but even if it goes a little bit beyond that, we still have a maximum cap on the cost of installation of the lights, and so that's they'll be held to that.
Okay. And we got into a discussion briefly with John's questions about the responsibilities of the city that accompany this contract. Can you elaborate on the responsibilities we have? I know there's a section E that discusses them, but could you summarize what our obligations are as a part of this? Or maybe that's a question for Chris. It's in the
Obligations as part of the contract?
Well, obviously, we have to cooperate with Schneider and give them kind of access. We've already given them lots of information and lots of data, but they're really going to sort of carry the ball in terms of doing the installation work, if that's answering your question. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking about.
Oh,
I
there's
think
a
we're
whole
also gonna have to pay
schedule.
them money, right?
We're out to pay the money.
It's an obligation.
I'm pulling it up.
There is are you talking about
Bill
the?
E, I just thought if you could summarize that, so we have some responsibilities in order to have that performance guarantee.
Oh, okay. Yes, there are certain things we can't do. I think that there are certain changes that we can't make to the project in order to allow them to be able to continue to use the presumptions and data that they were using to come up with a guarantee.
Okay. And the maintenance responsibilities, obviously.
The maintenance responsibilities will remain with LES.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. I hear reasons: safety, energy, protect the environment. These are all buzzwords to sell a project to the public. According to the paper, the reserve fund includes the occupation tax. Watchdogs is absolutely opposed to using occupation tax as a cash reserve to finance this. It needs to be off the table. Number one, this is not transparent, and it leaves the taxpayers responsible for this if you use the occupation tax, and also for the bond debt. This is the kind of thing that the U.S. government did with Social Security. It was protected, it was set up, and then they needed money, so they started borrowing against it, and now it is in deep trouble for the rest of the people. We had a discussion last November about the Build America bonds, and Chris Connolly testified that for this time, they're safe. But nobody knows what the U.S. government will do in the future, and that amounts to millions of dollars. The city already has a loan to PBA. The JPA sends its money, and the PBA is not self-supporting. Even though the occupation tax is above projections, in 11 years, nobody knows what will happen. A lot can happen in 11 years. Nobody knew there'd be a depression. Nobody knew that there would be defaulting all around in the last 2000s. Borrow from another account if you have to do this. I am surprised that Mr. Exridge would even let this come to the meeting, because he's supposed to be protecting the occupation tax to pay it back. And Ms. Raybold, if she is running for office, needs to be looking at this as a big problem for the taxpayers. And you don't get elected without taxpayers' approval. So we request that you take this cash reserve out of the responsibility for the lights. And also, we were sold that Aloe was going to be wonderful for us. And now we find that Black Hills is going to be charging customers for Aloe's mistakes. So you need to have more transparency about this. You need to protect the previous taxpayers' obligation before you take on something else to use the cash reserve occupation tax. I'm surprised to hear that it is included as a cash reserve because it should be protected as it was to be before. So look at this carefully, please. Please be considerate of your other obligations before you use this, what do I want to say? Bait and switch to finance something else. Thank you.
May I?
Next testifier.
Good evening. I'm Mary Quintero, and my address is 6421 Monticello Drive in Lincoln, Nebraska. I took notes as I was listening because my concerns about the proposed contract got added to. Councilman Camp, you asked a really interesting question about if this would become obsolete. First of all, from what I've read, the idea that these will be working for 25 years is highly optimistic. On Schneider's own website, when I typed in a search for LED residential lighting, street lighting, because I was looking for a different subject about it, which is why I was here tonight, I noticed a little thing in one of the blogs, I didn't pay a lot of attention to it, of a 1 to 50% failure rate, but they went on to explain do this, 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 and this, and it was a long list to avoid that problem because you will find on the internet a lot of discussion about failure rate with LEDs. You asked about the obsolete aspect of it, and just sitting there, I was able to pull up MIT has a new incandescent light bulb that is nearly 3 times more efficient than LEDs. Tesla is coming up with a light bulb better than LED in August 2017. These are just discussions. They haven't happened yet, but you can bet we're going to have lots of progress over a 25-year period. I would be very concerned about the maintenance issue, though, and who is responsible for that. The reason I'm here is to alert you to the discussions that have occurred and the other cities have entered into difficulties as they sought to convert their entire city to LED street lighting. And so the city of Davis, California, I happen to work in Sacramento County, California, and live here. Davis is a college town. It's a beautiful town. They switched over to LED lighting and had to stop because of the complaint level that they got from the citizens of the city, and they spent $325,000 after looking into it, retrofitting to correct the color, temperature, and the harshness and the glare that these lights produce. So I happen to live in Taylor Meadows, and we have 2 street lights that have already been converted. They're ugly, they're harsh, they create a sense of daylight in the evening, so when you go for a 9 or 10 o'clock walk, it's a whole different feel. And what we're proposing to do is over 12 months, change out all of our residential streets and make them look like commercial lighting. Right here. Can you see this light right here? Can you see these lights right here? This is what they look like, only brighter and harder to look at. So the paperwork that I prepared for you is what the city of Davis learned, and so we could learn from them. There's a solution, that's the good news. And they've already had to work their way through it and spend all the money after they changed the lights out, so we can fix it in advance if you want to go forward with this lighting, so that's the good news. Also, on CNN's website, they published the American Medical Association's warning about LED lighting and how it affects your circadian rhythm. So if we put these on residential streets, it's going to be invading bedrooms and affecting people's sleep patterns. And that's pretty well explained. I produced a copy for each of you of these 2 items, and they have links, and you're able to follow up on it. What I did is bolded and underlined the items of the greatest interest to me, so if you don't have a lot of time to read this 4 pages, if you just read the bold and underlined, you'd be pretty well updated. So the good news of what the city of Davis did is they figured out by adjusting the harsh glare down to a better lumen.
1 minute.
And, thank you. And what is called the correlated color temperature. The CNN article points out that the American Medical Association didn't fully understand how the color temperature works, so they didn't give a recommendation on that, but the article does, and the City of Davis did it. And so the color temperature needs to be 2,700 or less. 2,700 work just fine. And then the lumens, 1,800. The current contract, I believe, calls for 4,000. So it's commercial lighting for our residential streets. I don't want that. I hope none of you do. I'll give this to the clerk, and then I thank you for your time. And I know a lot of hard work went into this. I do. And hopefully we can save some money and go forward. Thank you so much.
Questions?
Oh, sorry.
John?
Ms. Quintero, or if I may, I think you probably answered it when you mentioned the City of Davis reduced to 2,700 kelvins and then
2,700 CCT, which is a color temperature, 1,800 lumens.
Lumens. Okay, is that what you referred to in your testimony about
that was their solution?
That was their 300 and some thousand.
But they had to pay $325,000 to retrofit all the residential streets. Yeah, we could do it in advance, and I don't think that should change the cost at all. I mean, you're actually requiring less output, so we might save more money. Unless the Schneider has already gone and purchased all of the fixtures, but hopefully not. So, any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Good evening, folks. Ed Holloway, 8310 Sandalwood Drive. I stand in support of the use of LEDs only because I like the savings. I use LEDs around my home. However, today's example of an amateur radio at Christian Brothers in Omaha on West Maple will show that their LED bulbs outside their building caused an immense amount of interference on my radio system. And that was in the VHF band, of which, of course, all of the statewide radio system went to VHF. And I think that's maybe some consideration into a study on their interference levels may be in order. The coloring, I play in a couple of bands and we have a lot of lighting, LEDs in front of me, behind me, and I tell you when I'm playing drums, I can't have them lights on me. It just bothers my eyes, but we turn them off and point them at other guys, the guitar players, they don't need them. So I stand in support of the savings, and you bring up some interesting questions, and so thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, would anyone else like to testify on this item? Do we have a rebuttal?
Frank Ularek, Sustainability Compliance Administrator. In terms of the AMA study and a lot of the information that's been put out, that's largely been debunked. LES has provided a lot of background information, industry response to the AMA study. The 4,000 Kelvin, which is what they have specified both for arterials and residential, is essentially moonlight. Again, we've got a fair amount of research and backing that LES has supported with the 4,000 K standard. And the AMA study, again, has largely been debunked, and we can provide articles to that effect.
Okay, Jane?
Frank, is the current lighting standard by LES is at 4,000 kelvins?
It is, and they've installed, I think when they first started, they might have put some 4,500 and 5,000 in, and the older technology indeed has caught the wrath of AMA and other folks about dark sky considerations, but the newer technology, in particular what's specified now by LES, meets all dark sky standards and is universally accepted. There are communities going to 3,000 and even lower. You have an increased cost, and there's actually not any savings from the energy draw from going to a lower Kelvin temperature, from what I understand. So we're following LES's lead. They've been very adamant about sticking with the 4,000, both from a cost and a performance standpoint, and the lack of any documented and confirmed effects on circadian rhythms and so forth.
Okay, John?
Yeah. Well, this information that Ms. Quintero gave us, it's dated June 21st of 16 on one of the items here that the gentleman discusses, the AMA questions, and I'm not sure about the other here. But I guess you said you have information to debunk that. Do you have that with you so we can?
I don't. I can send that to council.
But you want us to vote tonight?
I could make copies of stuff I've got.
Well, I think doing things from the dais like that, the comments concern me, among other things. Is that something, if we delayed the vote for 2 weeks, which would be our next meeting, that you can get us that information so that we can weigh the evidence?
I can get whatever information you need, you bet. I'd hope that we wouldn't delay, though, because our research and our backing from LES has indicated 4,000K is the best approach to take for Lincoln.
Well, I'd like to see some written assurances there. And again, I go back to my earlier question too on LES signing off on the maintenance levels. There, you wanted 250 a bulb, and here we're at 333. I think is what was said by Mr. Connolly. And
Okay. Cindy, then Lyrian.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I actually have a couple more staff questions and a question from Mr. Hinkle, and I wanted to get to the public testimony. So do you want me to ask those now, or when
Well, we've
we're
ended
considering
public
the vote?
testimony, so ask your questions.
Okay, and so I would like to speak with Mr. Hinkle for just a few minutes, if that's good.
Right, you bet.
Thank you.
Peter Hinkle, Schneider Electric.
Thanks for being here tonight. I appreciate it. We had some visits because I had a number of questions. I appreciate you answering those for me. I would like to, because I have a little bit of confusion about the numbers now, but first I would like to just have you explain how the measurement takes place once the work is done and how your guarantee kicks in and is paid if in the fact we don't reach the guarantee level.
Yeah, from a guarantee perspective, how we're approaching this is basically a pre and post retrofit measurement verification. It follows international standards that we use basically on all of our contracts, where we're testing and really looking at what is the current luminaire in place, and then what is the luminaire that's going in after the fact. So to get to all the kind of calculations that we put within the technical analysis, what we're really kind of simplifying it down to is if you have let's say a 250 watt luminaire in place currently, and you're going to a 75 watt, it's really the delta between the two energy uses, and we test those before and we test those afterwards within both the old fixture and then the new fixture once it's been installed. And then we actually provide that both dually to LES and to the city to make sure that the rate change is taking place accordingly.
Okay, and then when you say the rate change, can you explain what happens if we're not getting the rate change? What would you expect, and how do we know we're not getting it or are getting it?
So really the rate currently how you're being handled is at the end of each month, LES bills out based upon a GIS database, basically a set of points that has every single one of your lights mapped. Those lights then being mapped tell them whether it's a 250 watt or a 400 watt, and then they have a calculation that allows them to see how much that should cost from an energy perspective. And so those fall into different rate categories. So if it's a high mass post top, or it's a post top fixture, or it's a roadway luminaire, whatever the category is, that also correlates to their maintenance fee as well. And so what we're doing is on a weekly basis during construction, we're going to be updating LES as well as updating the city with exactly where those luminaires have been replaced, what's being replaced, how it's being replaced, and then providing that data back to LES. LES then in turn, as long as it's in before the end of the month and they have time to go ahead and update their rate sheet, they can then actually adjust the bill, not in real time, but on a monthly basis to then adjust or change that rate to the new LED luminaire rate that's been mentioned by staff.
And so it was mentioned that you guarantee the savings for the first year.
Mm-hmm.
So you measure after everything goes in. Are you talking about you guarantee the savings for the first year after final installation?
Yeah, so once the final installation's done, we have basically a reconciliation meeting where we come back and we say, hey, we've changed out this many lights and we've met our obligation from a contract perspective. We then also go through all of the savings calculations one more time with staff, and certainly we can provide that report from a council level as well, to show you what's been replaced or what was previously there, as well as what's been replaced, so that you guys can then tally up from a savings perspective. We'll then work with LES as well to rectify those in their GIS database, so they'll be updating that again, like I said, on a monthly basis. And then also our pre and post measurement verification, which allows us to then actually guarantee the savings, that what we're telling you that it's going to cost from a wattage standpoint or an energy standpoint is actually taking place as we're going through the process.
And in the event that the energy savings doesn't look like it's going to be as good as you guaranteed, what's the process at that point?
So if what we're finding is that our watts aren't adding up, or we're not matching when we do the post test, basically we would write a check to cover the difference for the city. And that check provides you kind of that assurance or that guarantee associated with the energy services process or the ESCO process.
So would that be at the end of the project installation, which we're told is going to be 12 months, or would it be the end of the second 12 months?
So it would actually be at the end of, well, I guess, would it be at the end of 12 months, Dan? End of construction, sorry, I just want to make sure I had my points correct.
Okay, and then one other thing, because I was operating thinking we were going to be having $1 million a year in energy savings, and it sounds like actually our energy savings is $375,000 a year. Is that what you're guaranteeing?
So the 375 and the maintenance cost is what kind of our initial cost. That's where the two numbers were that were shown up on the actual savings projection. And that again goes back to one of Mr. Camp's questions about not being able to predict the LES rates in the future. 2 years ago, LES was around $2 for LED lights. Currently, they're at $2.85, and their new projected rate is at about $3.32 per new LED luminaire that we'd be installing. I think the reason for that is they don't have a full LED system up and running yet. And so they believe that $332 will cover their costs in the future. But as time goes on, I think they'll see that their maintenance expenses will be greatly reduced. And that's where I think Frank's comments about working with them and negotiating in good faith with LES, which we've been doing throughout this entire process, will hopefully come into play and actually hopefully see even better rates in the future. That's just something we cannot predict as an energy services company, is what your utility provider will charge.
I understand. I'm just trying to determine exactly what your guaranteed savings is. So it's the 375 plus the 495?
Yeah, we're guaranteeing essentially the rate change in its essence. It's the savings from the energy cost savings, as well as the new rate based upon the projected cost that we have from LES.
But not the maintenance, or?
Yes, including the
Okay,
maintenance.
so about 870,000.
Correct.
Okay, that's the figure I wanted. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Leary.
Questions were very similar, so I just wanted to review. I mean, the difference between an ESCO and a straight bid is that there's a risk transfer. You're guaranteeing savings for once the installation is completed. You're guaranteeing that year's worth of savings to us. Is that correct?
Right, and we're also guaranteeing this from a guaranteed maximum cost. So we have right now 26,799 luminaires currently in place. Mr. Camp and I had that conversation, I believe, during the ESCO resolution about how many were out there. But the real value for us is if we do go from a 9-month, let's say we go to a 16-month construction cycle. At no point are we coming back to the city and saying, you know what, it was a bad winter, we had to have our crews out here longer, we need to have extra money to cover our costs. Our goal and really is to get that 9 to 12-month window, understanding that there is football going on in the fall, there is times that we won't be able to work, there'll be certain events that we have to obviously not be around certain parts of the city. And so that's going to kind of dictate our construction schedule. Also, as you're aware, the weather is something that plays itself here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And that's one of the concerns, obviously, as we've kind of pushed this a few times, that kind of worries us, is as we continue to look at this project and say, okay, what's the deadline or what's the timeline now to begin this process? We've really got about a 6-month window before weather starts to turn, and we really have to kind of limit amount of crews. So we've kind of pushed it from a 9 to 12-month installation, but again, if we get an early winter or a winter that lingers like it has this past year, I mean, it could be more difficult for our crews to get out there and really accomplish it in even a 12-month period. But at no point are we coming back to the city for any kind of a change order or anything along those lines. In fact, as we go through this process, there'll certainly be changes within the contract, luminaires, so forth and so on. Things that we'll take on as a part of this process, just because we want to get it done and have overtime or whatever it might be necessary to complete the project in an acceptable amount of time.
So you're guaranteeing not only the energy savings, but also a ceiling on our costs for installation to replace the system.
That's correct.
Okay. And then one of the ways you do that is because you back your work with the performance bond? And is
Right.
that the case here in this contract?
Yes, we have all payment and performance bonds associated with the actual contract itself.
Thank you.
John?
Good to see you again, Mr. Hinkle.
Good to see you.
Appreciate you coming up from Kansas City. You answered one of my questions on the measurement, so it's before and after, so say within 12, 14 months. And as I'm understanding this, though, your guarantee of savings is only for that period, and whatever happens the rest of the 9 or 10 years is at our risk. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, I mean, with lighting, I think this was brought up, previously in the ESCO resolution discussions. Really, once you do lighting, you're not going to have a increase in the wattage a lamp is going to use. In fact, in most cases, it's going to decrease. Like talking about the fluorescent lamps that you brought up earlier, those have a massive drop off within the first few years of actually being implemented from the amount of energy they're using, simply because they put off less light, they become less efficient, so forth and so on. But when it comes to LEDs, you've seen studies out there that even in year 10, 11, 12, in fact, the Department of Energy has one of their first LEDs that they've installed, I think it was around 15 years ago, and it's operating well above what their expectations were. I don't know if it's 90, 95, 99%, but it was significantly higher than what they had originally anticipated when it was initially installed. So the reason we do the pre and post is because it costs money to continue that measurement verification. We certainly can do that if that would be, the decision of the council. That could be something that we could add to the contract, after year one, once the savings has been proven. In fact, in many of our contracts, we have 1 year, and then the decision for our clients is either to continue that measurement verification process, or they feel like they've met their guarantee obligations, they feel like the savings are going to be there for years to come. We don't want to continue with that kind of an agreement. It's really up to our clients at that point. But certainly at the end of year one, if you'd like us to, we can come back and provide you with what would it cost to continue that measurement verification process, if that's spot checking lights or however you'd want to handle it.
Now, I guess I'm a little confused because when we had first been approached on the ESCO approach on lighting and other upgrades, that it was going to be guaranteed for that period. And now we're just at 1 year out of 10 or 11 years here. And so it's a change in the approach. And so the city is really taking the greater risk. And the thing that concerns me on that is I did the mass conversion several years ago from T12s to T8s and electronic ballast. And I'm finding failure of my electronic ballast in 4 to 5 years. And so not only am I not getting the savings, I'm having the cost of materials and labor to replace all of those. And so I'm concerned that you may have, one LED in the Department of Energy that's lasted 15 years, but what happens if there is some component? Because again, we were told, this was going to be much greater, and it's been more costly.
Well, and again, we have a 1 year warranty associated with the project from a Schneider Electric perspective, but you also have about a number of different luminaires that have up to a 10-year warranty associated with them. So if they were to go out, if they were to be in need of replacement, or, to your point, even though these don't have a ballast, if there was something that were to fail, the manufacturer of those would actually be able to provide either a fix, or in most cases, it would be a whole new luminaire that the city would then have. And per your agreement with LES, it would be no different from an LES and a maintenance standpoint if it was in year 9.5 to be able to have them replaced, as long as it's within that warranty period that's provided by the manufacturer.
But the warranty's on materials only, I would assume.
Yeah, it would be on materials only. I mean, that's just like anything else in terms of any kind of warranty. I mean, if you were to go buy a car, for example, and you said, hey, I want to have parts, labor, everything for 100,000 miles for the full life of that vehicle, your car wouldn't be, your F-150 wouldn't be 50,000, it would be 85,000, it would be 100,000, it would be much more expensive to cover that warranty for that period of time.
Well, I replaced a whole building full of HVAC units a year ago, and I had an A-coil go out last week, and they paid for the A-coil, but it cost me over $1,200 labor to replace that $300 part. And so I'm just trying to look at that. Now,
You're technically paying for that labor, regardless of what you do with me today. LES and their maintenance rate is incorporated into that labor cost. So if you said, hey, Peter, we don't want to do this isn't something I'm interested in, no matter what you do, LES is charging you for the labor, whether they go out and replace it or not, through that maintenance rate. So while it encompasses a lot of different things within that $3.32, the luminaire and the labor to replace that luminaire is what you're already paying for. What we're saying is, by making the system more efficient, I can take you from the $5, $4.50, whatever the different other packages are for their more expensive HID fixtures that are also less energy efficient, and get you down to that $3.32. That's where that maintenance cost really comes from. Now, that doesn't get away from the fact that LES is still maintaining your lights, which means they're still providing the labor source from a maintenance perspective. So I think that from a concern of, hey, Peter, if this light fails in 9.5 years, who's going to pay for the labor? Well, you're going to pay for it over 9.5 years with LES regardless, because that's what their obligation is within your current streetlight ordinance moving forward, and even with the change today.
But over half of the savings you're projecting, as Ms. Lamb quoted there, 375 on energy savings and 485 for the maintenance. If we're having to maintain them, and we're still paying that, and it's gone, as you had said, from $2 a couple of years ago to $285, and now they want to go to $333, that exceeds the 2.5% per year projection.
Right, and our 333 is what we're projecting, and that's what we're using moving forward with the 2.5% escalation. Now, what they're at right now for many of their fixtures is closer to 5, I could say 6, I don't know exactly. I can't remember off the top of my head what all their numbers are, as they have a number of different rate categories. But really the savings is really the delta of those do-nothing HID fixtures that you currently have in place, the yellow globes, so to speak, versus going with an LED fixture and what they're projecting their rate costs are going to be. And I think, again, it goes back to the fact that, and working with LES and really having a number of different conversations with their streetlight group, they're trying to figure this out as well. What's it really going to cost them? And at this point, that 363 covers their current costs for the HID and the LED fixtures. So I would predict that, hopefully over time, you could work with LES and be able to continue to push that price lower based upon the efficiencies that you're going to gain within the LED system.
Finally, Ms. Quintero, I believe it was, mentioned this incandescent light that's come out that's now a third the energy as what the old ones had been, or what LED is. Are you aware of that?
I would say that the technology is always changing. You talk about a fluorescent lifespan that lasted close to 35 years. You're dealing with the T8, kind of the end of that legacy, I guess you'd call it, starting with T12s, T10s, then down to T8s, then to T5s. Fluorescent technology is definitely running its course, but it wasn't just running its course. These manufacturers set up these facilities in such a way that they have to be able to then recoup their cost. So the reasons it lasts 30 to 35 years, and the reason that the LED, I would predict, would last a good 20, 25, if not 30, 35 years, is because manufacturers like Halophane and Cooper and Philips and all these guys that are associated with the LES already approved list, they're setting up these factories for LEDs. They're not going to change within a matter of a couple of years and say, you know what, we've got to go to this latest and greatest technology. That's just never been any kind of a business model from a manufacturing standpoint. Being that we have Schneider Electric right here in the town from a manufacturing, I'll put my plug, 275 employees. We know what that's about. I mean, it's yes, I understand your concern. I understand that new technologies come along all the time. But at no point would I say that the LED technology is at the T8 level. If anything, I would argue LED is kind of within that sweet spot of it's finally hit a point where it becomes cost feasible for cities, private entities. Heck, myself, I finally, jumped into the LED game with my house and kind of updated all the lights just because I said, you know what, it makes sense. Because your paybacks are real and you're finally at a price point where you can actually afford to install. 5 years ago, it really didn't make a whole lot of sense. A lot of the issues I think that were brought up from the AMA study are really based upon older technology. They're not based upon the latest and what, these different companies have really abide by. They hear the AMA, they hear all these different entities who, poke holes in their industry, and then they try to fix those problems, which is really what they've done over the past few years.
But do you know about this incandescent that's much more energy efficient?
I have heard, I've heard of plasma lighting. So, I would say I've heard of majority of lights that are out there, but I don't know exactly which one she's speaking of, so I won't want to say that I know exactly which technology she's talking about. So no, I don't want to sit here and tell you that I know exactly what she's talking about.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Or Cindy?
Yeah, so I don't have any more questions for Mr. Hinkle, thank you. I did want to talk to Brandon, though, and I think he left. So do you know if he'll be back?
Some other day he'll be back.
Yeah,
He's
I think.
gone.
Yeah, I really am wanting to discuss I'm good with the LED lighting project with Schneider, but I want to discuss the internal funding more. And so since he's not here, that's a little difficult, but yeah, I'm thinking that one of my colleagues may be asking for a delay.
Do you want to ask the questions? Because we certainly have worked with him on the project. We may know the answer, and if not, we can
Well,
What's the operating
so, well, I have questions about the internal funding, as far as what is the size of the current reserve funds of the city?
Well, I'm pretty sure they're north of $300 million.
Okay, and of that, how much do we already have? Someone had mentioned that possibly there was other internal borrowing that had been done. Do you know how much we have committed for internal borrowing?
I know that the internal borrowing that came up earlier or in our previous conversation was the fact that we used internal borrowing, a mechanism pretty close to this, to actually purchase the light system from LES originally. I know that's what we were talking about when we talked about earlier internal financing.
That was 17.4 million.
I'm sorry?
That was a 17.4 million.
17.4 million? That's what's already there?
That's been paid off.
Okay, and so, and I think that we do some internal borrowing for purposes of small TIF projects?
That could be correct. I think that's $250,000 or less for small TIF.
Okay, so, but do you know how many of those are out there?
I don't.
Okay. And then I wondered, so I was having a conversation with a financial expert the other day, and he had indicated that maybe this would be an okay amount, but I'm wondering what the maximum amount our finance director would say we should be committing in terms of internal financing, because we do lose obviously some liquidity by borrowing this from ourselves. Whereas if we were just doing debt service, we would only have a certain amount of payment.
Right. Well, and I know Brandon researched that thoroughly when we were trying to look about it to see if he felt comfortable with this particular amount. And I know he felt comfortable with this amount and not significantly more. So I would assume.
I'm sorry, comfortable with this amount and what?
With this amount here, but not significantly more. So
Okay,
I
but
would
do we know what significantly more, how much that is?
We certainly can ask him.
How close are we to the cap? That's kind of my question of what would be comfortable. And then I do have, so if I understand it correctly, the savings itself is not $1 million. The savings is anticipated to be about $870,000, but then we have this under $226,000 that's being budgeted per year currently for the conversion. Did I understand that correctly?
Right, it's actually a little over $300,000. Yeah, the 226 is the $226 per fixture. But right, those are the three funding streams available, right, for what we're already paying.
Okay,
and
and
savings.
Is the $226,000 a year already reflected in the CIP?
Not sure what the 226,000. So there's the energy savings, that's about 375. There's the maintenance savings, which is 495, and the third category is a little over $300,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wrote that down wrong.
Yep. But the number that you're thinking of is because each fixture was about $226 individually.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so that third one, so those all three are reflected as funding sources that we're paying right now that we could use to repay back to our savings.
Okay, and so my question is the $300,000 in the CIP, or where is that coming out of?
It's in the current budget.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's in general fund budget?
General fund, which pays both the energy maintenance
those,
and the
yeah.
COPS payment on LED
So you said it
replacements.
could be used to repay. Will it be used to repay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There's a difference between
Oh,
could
yeah,
and will.
you're right. You're right.
I did ask Brandon that question earlier today on the phone, and he said it's all going to the payment on the bond.
Right. And the other thing I wanted to make sure we pointed out too is people have asked a lot about projections and about our confidence in those projections. And I think, and as Peter pointed out, doing the engineering on electric lights and the changes in electric lights is relatively straightforward for this project. So you can have a lot of confidence in these projections. And when you talk about LES's rates and confidence in where their rates are and where their rates are headed, I think you look historically. And I think historically you can see that LES sets a pretty constant rate. They set a pretty stable rate. And ultimately, if you want to talk about risk and about the ability to be responsible to the community, the fact of the matter is this body confirms the LES rates. So I can't imagine a wild swing where this body wouldn't have a chance to weigh in. I can't imagine it because of the historical pattern that we've seen. And the ultimate belt and suspenders is the fact that this body oversees those rate changes and those rate requests. So that all gets factored into budget time, that all gets factored in at any time you're making any of those financial decisions.
But I would say on that, Mr. Carlson, that LES is going to come up with whatever its costs are. And if the commodity costs increase, if its labor costs increase, its rates are going to increase, and there's very little gap in there to really work around.
Right, but what we see historically is a very, very stable enterprise. That's one of the strengths of LES.
Other staff questions? Thank you very much. Next item, please.
All right, next is item 5E, authorizing the mayor to execute an interlocal agreement with Lincoln Public Schools for funding of community learning centers, behavioral and mental health services, and additional school resource officers.
Chris Connolly, City Law Department. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the latest version that's come out. It is part of motion to amend number 2, the attachment that is with it. What I would tell you, the main difference between the version that you had last week and the version that you have today is that we worked out some language with LPS on training costs for the backfill officers, if you will, so that we can put the SROs into the schools. Chief Bleimeister is here and he can fill you in on any details. But I would tell you that we are looking at having a threat assessment officer available by September 1. And we would also, I believe the chief will tell us that we're looking at being able to have the SROs in place, I believe, in January of 2019. The dollars remain the same. It is still $1.05 million that both the city and LPS are contributing to this agreement. The structure is still the same. We still have the same board as was discussed last time. And so with that, knowing that there are a number of people that want to talk tonight, I'll just open it up for questions.
Okay, well, we'll hear what you have to say, Chief.
And again, I'm just here to confirm what Chris has to say, that we have worked through the funding streams and are comfortable with those based upon our current budgetary process and also that going forward.
Okay, questions? Cindy?
Yeah, I just want to confirm again that in order to get them in the schools, the SROs, by January, we need to have them in that July. We need to have some recruits in that July training class.
That is correct. July 19th is when that training class begins.
Thank you.
Jane?
But Chief Bleimeister, you may not be using any of those new recruits for filling in the additional SRO positions. You may or may not, depending upon whether they've completed the necessary amount of training to qualify.
I can assure you that those hired in July will not be the ones that will be filling in the positions in January of 2019.
They'll be backfilling.
Backfill,
Yeah.
yes. Yep.
Okay, other questions? Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Please come forward. If people sit there, I'm just going to call for the next item. So, okay.
We're just old and we're still.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
I'm up. I'm young. I'm moving. I'm ready.
Okay.
My
And
name's
if you
Kristen.
want to, hang on, before you go.
Sure.
If you intend on testifying, please raise your hand so we get an idea. Okay, so when the next, you can come up, someone can come up while this person is talking, and you can stand there waiting. Okay, please go ahead.
My name's Kristen Twidwell. I am a member of the Parents United Committee, but I think I should also say I could also probably be a member of the Nebraskans Against Guns, because I'm not pro-gun. I don't think our problems can be solved by more guns. I don't believe that the way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. I say that only to let you know my stance on guns, but at the same time, I'm here because I support SROs. I have 2 kids in school. They would love to have lunch with a police officer. I would love for them to start building a positive relationship with a police officer and let them know that this is another adult that you can trust, that you can go to, that is a safe person. Why not start that in middle school? Why not start that in elementary school? But I know we got to do one thing at a time. I personally love the idea of having police officers there that are getting to know the children and that are trained to pick up on if there is increased threat. You know, it's another source. Don't put all that pressure on the teachers. Don't put all that pressure on the kids to report that. Why not have a police officer that's there that knows the kids that can pick up on that? You know, a part of me a huge part of me wants to be at home with my family right now. And I wanted to just email you and then tell you all of these things. But then the other part of me wanted to be here just to say that we can't keep dragging this on. I know that these things take time, but we don't have time. There's been another shooting. That could have been us. That could be us tomorrow. And then what am I supposed to tell my kids? I'm sorry, the adults couldn't agree. We had to keep meeting each week until we could figure out what we agree on, but I'm sorry that we couldn't protect you. And the reality is, at the rate that this is happening, it's not a matter of if this happens to Lincoln. It's a matter of when. And when this happens in Lincoln, are we going to be able to look at our kids and say, we did the best that we could do? And at this point, I would say no. So I know that there's been conversation about this being drug out another week, and I'm just saying, just push it through, and let's wrap it up, and let's trust our police officers. Where are you? There you are. Let's trust them to protect our kids, and why not invite them into our schools and help us make them safer? Thank you.
Next testifier.
Hi there. I first want to say thank you to everyone for stepping into the roles that you have and devoting so many hours of your lives to problem solving and listening to a variety of perspectives and experiences. I'm Kristen Grosskopf. I live at 6501 X Street. I actually oppose the SROs, but I'm told that's a done deal, so I'll talk about the MOU. A little background, I've been teaching for about 20 years, probably a little more, but then you know how old I am. I've been an administrator in education for 7 years total. I've been a member on the PFLAG board for 5 years, president for 3. I've been a CASA for 3 years. My original teaching role was in Teachers College, teaching pre-service teachers to go into elementary, middle school, and high schools. Just briefly, I want to remind people of the Age of Enlightenment that happened in the 17th and 18th centuries, before which, when a person violated their tribes or their clan's rules, would say the devil or evil spirit made them do it. So they would break open the skull to let the demons leave the head. I will fast forward to after that and the embracing of research and evidence. Enlightenment also brought the right to pursue happiness. Fast forwarding to the child saver movement, when we realized we can't treat children as adults. They're different beings. Even recent evidence has finally said, look, we scan their brains and we find that they're not adults until age 25. That's an aggregate number, so some people may take longer. Point is, children, we created the juvenile justice system to create a different field to deal with children who are wayward or going in a non-pro-social direction. We realized they needed a safety net, okay? So we don't even charge youth, we adjudicate them. Then I want to fast forward to the point that school is considered to be like home for kids. The teachers are in loco parentis. Okay, so it's home for kids. And I can't tell you how many of my Captain LPD friends have told me this: the home of an individual is sacred. They don't want to go into a home unless they absolutely have to or are invited to. So when you switch that over to schools and kids, when we take police officers into the schools, they're violating those kids' homes. We're violating their room of safety, the place where teachers will tell us, look, this might be the only safe place for certain kids to act out, and then we can figure out how to address that and try to resolve that. So we have unintended consequences that are going to come from this, and I want to go back to what we learned from the Age of Enlightenment when we embraced evidence. I'm kind of fond of evidence myself, working with research for so many years, and it only takes 10 minutes of doing a search for the evidence on the value of adding SROs to schools. I can tell you'll find about 12 articles within 10 minutes. None of them have any productive outcomes from adding SROs to schools. And I totally understand people's fear of the most horrible thing where you have a shooter. Well, having a person there with a gun isn't going to stop what just happened. I brought this up in my own classes when students say, we just need to arm teachers. I'm like, I'm not going to wear a gun. And by the way, let's make this real. What happens? A shooter comes in right now, boom, what happens? Everyone's in the back row. I don't even have a line of sight to the door. Okay, so The MOO is a good attempt at trying to mitigate something that I think is a really bad idea. Number 2 on section 1 says to minimize student discipline issues so they do not become school-based referrals. Yes, but we need to clarify that. I suggest we don't allow SROs to refer youth to the juvenile justice system. If something is so out of hand, get another officer as they would need anyway. And that SRO can serve as a witness. Still in section 1, it goes to number 6. I would add number 7, insert quality program assessment. This is universally not done enough. We need to have evidence to, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this would be a good thing, but let's be dogmatic about keeping the best data possible. Section 2, number 4, I'm concerned it might be a wording issue. It says SROs should not interview students or collect evidence for solely LPS disciplinary purposes.
Time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Ma'am, I'd just like to clarify one thing. When Chief Blymeister testified before us and on our super comments, it was brought out that I think we had something like 257 cases last year or the year before. Of those, all but 8 were referred by LPS to the SRO. The SROs did not take initiative. So I think we're doing some good things, and my understanding is that LPS is also going to work on training from its end, all of its teachers and other professionals.
That's a wonderful idea, too. Yep.
Next testifier.
Hi again. It's getting to be a habit here. Hi, I'm Mo Neal with Nebraskans Against Gun Violence and the Peace and Justice Group. And for the parents who are so concerned, I get your concerns, believe me, I do. I just want to make sure that those kids who are minorities or have disabilities are taken care of in this MOU at this point. So I have a few comments about the MOU. Thank you for improving it, and I think you were listening to us last week. Will the new MOU override the current interlocal that is in place for the high schools? It does. Does the new interlocal, how does that work? Never mind. It will go over the high schools that are covered now, that interlocal. So you'll have 2 interlocals?
There will be 2 interlocals, but they're for different purposes. This current interlocal is going to be dealing with the middle schools.
Right.
The other interlocal is dealing with SROs for the high schools.
Okay. So the MOU that makes the recommendations, will it be over both of those or just the new one?
I guess, I don't know what the chief's intentions are with applicability to the other MOU.
Mo, it's our belief that the MOU is philosophical in nature and does have reporting requirements into it, as well as dictating beliefs and actions in the way that we treat kids. And so, yes, it will be universal within both the interlocal that covers the high school SROs and the middle school.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask the council at this point to encourage you to do more. You did the bump stock vote, and I know that was not a unanimous vote, or was it? Anyway, and you got some heat from that. I believe there were some really ugly threats made, and I've heard a few of those myself. To take a more proactive position in the future with the kinds of bills that you bring forward for the city to implement and to be voted on. Particularly, I'm interested in something called a red flag bill, that you would start having a red flag bill law for cases of domestic violence or abuse or situations where there's a family member who is undergoing crisis, and you'd make a bill where the person's family or law enforcement could recommend that the case be taken to a judge and a restraining order or restriction for that person having their guns in the home be implemented. There's 6 states currently doing it, and I believe 21 others are currently have bills pending. And kudos on the bump stock. I think that's all I've got to say, other than there are some recommendations on language in the MOU that Kristen didn't get through all of when she was talking. And I think we can write those up and send them to you, that you might be able to implement them They're just minor things. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Next testifier.
Whose phone is this?
Oh, mine.
Yep.
Sorry.
Good evening. My name is Jeanette Jones-Vazansky. I'm the president of the Lincoln branch of the NAACP. Thank you for letting me come again and talk to you about the MOU. But before I just mention the one really pressing matter for members, I just want to say that my understanding is that whatever is decided, this plan is not going to be implemented, or people will not be in the schools until January, right? January 1st or after January 1st, 2019. So we have time to get it right. Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Because I think one of the reasons why, well, September as well, but then also January. But I think the reason why we keep coming is because these are real concerns, and I just want to emphasize that these are not, we're not being flippant, we're being really decisive about the comments that we're making and that we're sending to Dr. Joel and to the City Council, as well as other important individuals and stakeholders. I was really asked to talk about the whereas section again. If you go to, I believe it is the fourth one. No, I'm sorry, it's the fifth one. Whereas LPS staff should generally not involve LPD in enforcement of LPS discipline policies. And I think this is the second or third time that we wanted to emphasize that instead of should, it would be would not or will not. And that's for several reasons. I think one of them is that we think once, in terms of regular discipline, we're unclear as to why police officers would need to be called in unless it is a criminal activity. And so for us, some of this language is a little bit vague. What discipline policy warrants calling a police department officer, what does not? And so we would just urge that that language would be more restrictive. Whether or not that happens, we'll see. But I think that for the most part, we are very concerned with the kind of latitude with the should language. The other thing that I would say is that I know that the language of disproportionality is in there, and we appreciate that, and we are happy to see that. I don't know what the city's stance is on using more directed language, particularly around groups that are mentioned in all these studies that individuals have cited. And I think it might be just to list those things, race, gender, ethnicity, just to be a little bit more targeted in that language so that people don't come away with thinking that disproportionality is not dealing with intersectionality, I guess is the way to put it. So I think those are my own comments for today. And thank you for your time and for allowing me to speak to you. Any questions that you have for me?
Thank
I
you.
think what I would like is Chief Blymeister to verify exactly when the SROs are staged in or backfilled.
Yeah, so I can be clear about that.
Correct. Just one point of clarification.
Yes.
The threat assessment officer will begin assignment in September
Right.
of
That's the first
2018.
Mhm.
And although they won't be assigned to a specific school,
Mhm.
they will have interaction within all of the different LPS schools.
Right.
And the remainder of the school resource officers, as planned today, if passed, will begin in January of 2019.
Mhm.
Does that clarify
Nope,
the
yep,
timeline
that's what I
for
have
you?
down, right. Thank you.
Okay. Next testifier.
Hello, my name is Vicki Wood, and I am here as a parent and also a member of Nebraskans Against Gun Violence and Peace and Justice in Lincoln Public Schools. I think my concerns are about accountability, about record keeping, about doing things that are empirically supported. And I'm really concerned about bias and what a lot of other people in my group are concerned about. We know that there is discriminatory discipline starting when children are in elementary school all the way up until they are old in terms of race and how they are treated. So that's something that concerns me a lot. One of the biggest things that I want to bring to the table today, just briefly, is that this is only the beginning and it's a very small part of the problems that we're facing. I think that having an SRO actually brings a false sense of security. the last two large-scale shootings that we had, and now we have to talk about them as large-scale and small-scale because there's small shootings that happen all the time where 2 or 3 people are shot and they barely even make the news. But the last two large-scale shootings, we had an SRO who hid, and the last one we have an SRO in critical condition because he was shot in both of his arms and wasn't able to do anything to stop the violence that happened in the school. So I want to bring that point up. The other thing is that I think by doing what we're doing right now, we also are normalizing school violence to the extent that we're saying this is inevitably going to happen and this is how we're going to respond to it, as if we cannot do anything legislatively or legally. We did a shooting simulation at my workplace, and it hit me pretty hard that all the responsibility is back on us now. If we don't recognize gunshots as gunshots, if we think that they're fireworks, that's our own damn fault. If we don't recognize the sounds of gunfire and do the things that we're supposed to do to protect ourselves, well, too bad for us. It hit me really strongly that this is really taking the responsibility off of the legislative branch, which is who should be, and our government, which is who should be protecting us and our children. Also, by running these drills in our school, we're saying to kids that this kind of violence is normal and unpredictable, and it can't be stopped like a tornado or a natural disaster. It's one thing to hide under your desk because a tornado might come. There's nothing we can do in the state of Nebraska about a tornado coming, and we should be prepared. It's another to say you need to hide under your desk from a hail of bullets that's going to come from a crazy person. I think that we really need to think a lot about the messages we are sending when we're doing these kinds of things, and think about the philosophical background and not just the practical. I thank you all so much for listening to people's concerns and for taking them seriously. And I hope that as a council and as a city and as a country, we can start to look at some more root causes and address those before we spend a lot of time and money thinking that people in schools are going to stop this violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Conway, 1545 Garrett Lane, apartment 101. I am a resident of Lincoln and the father of a student glad to be in his last week at Scout Middle School and a bit anxious to start at Lincoln Southwest High School in just a few short months. I am proud to be a member of Parents United for Greater School Security, and I'm honored to have been working with the members of that group for the past several months. Adding 6 school resource officers and a threat assessment officer is a great start, but that cannot be where the improvement of our school security stops. We must use this as a starting point and work toward a school resource officer in every middle school and a regular presence in every elementary school, in addition to the officers already stationed in our high schools. I've heard many other people who have decided to join the conversation on school security, and I thank them for raising concerns that need to be considered. People have raised their voices in opposition to the presence of guns in our schools, no matter who carries them. People have raised their voices in concern over the potential for disparate treatment based on skin color, sexual orientation, or degree and type of disability. And everybody involved in these discussions has raised their voices to call for some sort of action to be taken. I believe that we can all agree that something needs to be done to improve the safety and security of our children before, during, and after the school day. My friends, the chief problem is not guns. The problem is not systemic racism in police departments or school systems. The problem is not whether the principal, teacher, social worker, or police officer has the same skin color, sexual orientation, or disability of a student. The problem is that there are people on this earth who have no respect for other people or for themselves. The problem is that there are people who have placed no value on human life. The problem that exists is a problem that has plagued mankind since the days of Adam. Evil exists in this world. Evil is real. Anyone who tries to tell you differently is either lying or woefully ignorant. And the truth of the matter is that evil will use whatever tools are available to advance its plan of destruction. Guns, bombs, drugs, alcohol, gangs, anger, lust, greed, addiction, laziness, and even loneliness. I know we can't ever hope to stop all evil. It's not humanly possible. What is possible, though, is to make it as hard as possible for that evil to hurt our children. If that means one door in and out at the school, then so be it. If that means an armed, uniformed law enforcement officer in the halls of every one of our schools, put them there. If that means assigning seats in the lunchroom, break out the seating chart. If that means letting sniffer dogs roam the halls of our schools, send them in. I'm the last person in the world who wants to have police presence all over the place. I'm the last person in the world who would ever invite someone in that uniform into my house. Not because I don't like cops, but because if there's no reason for them to be there, there's no reason for them to be there. But there's no easy answer. There's no answer that makes everybody happy. We are moving in the right direction toward protecting our children at school. But I pray to my Father in heaven that we are not moving too slowly. 6 additional school resource officers and a threat assessment officer is a great start, but it's not enough. Our mayor, our city council, and our Board of Education must continue to show a commitment to the safety of our children. This is no time for half measures. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Next testifier.
My name is Corey Raymond. I have 2 boys that go to LPS. I live at 3100 South 54th. God, I'm tired of this. I know you guys are too. After Florida, I dropped off Ethan. I told you guys about that. And this same shit happened again today at Monday. So I just sat there. I drove up the block and I sat there and I watched because it looks like everybody's getting their school shooting in before the end of the school year, right? I drove over to Pound Middle School and I sat up the block and I made sure everybody got in the school. And everything was fine. Drove back to Calvert. Everything was fine. I went home. I was getting out of my truck and I was going to go to work. I hear a siren. I hear another siren. I hear another siren. And they're all heading that way. And my gut just dropped, you know. And again, I don't claim that I love my kids any more than anybody else. So I made the rounds again to make sure everything was okay. I don't think that this solves it, but I think it sure takes a step in the right direction. I looked at the ACLU's complaints. They started some type of petition. And I was looking at some of their complaints or the reasons that this should be delayed. And it has referrals. Black students represent 6.4 to Lincoln's student population, yet they account for 26% of referrals to law enforcement. Referrals to law enforcement. Disabled students represent referrals to law enforcement. What are the police supposed to do? They get a call, they go investigate it. They're not out there referrals. That means people call and say a crime is committed and the police go there and investigate it. But, this comprehensive justice plan, if you want statistics, if you want a plan, spend some time actually reading this, because I don't know how you could keep any more statistics from gender, race, disability. Chief Blindmeister looks at that every month and to see what his police officers are doing. It's not, when he gets a call, when the police get a call about a crime being committed, they don't get to say, we've reached our quota on black crime, we're not going to go. That's where the disparity is. The only way you can do that is if the police say, well, we're not going to report to that because we've hit our quota on Asian kids, or we need to go arrest more white kids, so we'll go send it out. That's your disparity, because once they're called, if you look at this and you look at their statistics, they give out tickets and citations in equal number. If they decide not to charge a black kid or a white kid, it's flat. It's even. And you guys heard Chris Turner, Sarah Hoyle. Again, they look at this data from every point. I don't know what the ACLU wants more data on, because body temperature at the time of the crime, because that's the only thing you could analyze anymore, is the glucose level of the person who committed the crime at the time, because you cannot possibly have more data than Lancaster County keeps. And, you know, Sarah Hoyle, when she was talking, made my ears bleed, because there was so much data there and looking at it at every possible. So the ACLU, they should listen more, because there is no more possible way to keep more data. The counter evidence that I've heard, you know, we've had SROs forever. They're in the high schools. What problems we've given you evidence from prior SROs, from students. We've given you statistics. The evidence all demonstrates what a benefit they are to the community. I haven't heard any counter evidence except data from 10 years ago from Connecticut or this jurisdiction. And you know, I just read an article where, was it Dixon, Illinois, at graduation? Those kids are pretty happy about that school resource officer. They honored him for stopping a school shooting last Wednesday. The reason it was a small school shooting is because he shot the kid and stopped that school shooting. And I'll tell you else what, that school resource officer that took a bullet for those kids down in Texas, maybe, you know, those parents, it's very sad that 10 of them are deceased, but I guarantee kids 11, 12, and 13 are pretty happy that he rushed in there and stopped that. This is a good bill, and I appreciate everybody's work, and I hope from across the aisle we can all come together and make this work. Thank you.
Next testifier, please. It's inappropriate for people to directly address another testifier, please.
Good evening. I'm Greg Jeffers. I live at 7801 South 63rd, 68516. Before, when I've been up here, I have had prepared testimony. I didn't tonight, and I'm trying to stay calm. I hate doing this, but it does stink that we need to have police in schools. It just does. But the facts are what they are. When we all know that LPD is understaffed. The stats show it. It's just a fact. We're understaffed as a police force for communities of similar size across the nation. And the question I keep coming back to is, and I am a parent. I have 2 at Scott and 1 at Wysong. Is who do you call when something like this happens? Rhetorical question. We call Chief Blymeister's guys, and we're not calling anybody else to respond when these things happen. And to me, it's just that simple. And unfortunately, in today's world, these things are going to continue to happen until things outside of, inside the family and all that other social stuff that isn't here to be talked about really, until some of that stuff turns around. But until then, we can't wait. We have got to put the resource officers in place, make other changes to the facilities themselves to make them tougher targets, but to even take them off the target list for these crazy people that are out there. And this is the way to start to do it. These guys aren't just going to be, these officers aren't going to be pulled off the street and just sent to a school. They are going to go through a selection process. They're going to go through training to specifically put them in front of kids on a daily basis, to interact with those kids, to interact with administrators. The MOU is, I mean, I'm impressed by that. This is my first time looking at that document. I mean, it does do a good job of laying out those roles in a way that clearly states when an officer should step in and when they should back up. When it's clearly an LPS disciplinary issue, then they should stay away. But the idea that the good guys shouldn't be more involved in a kid's life as early as possible to me, just defies my logic. police aren't going anywhere, right? So why not have them be positively engaged with kids who grow up to be an adult? And it doesn't make logical sense for the reverse to be true. I mean, I'm a very logical person in that way. So I would ask you tonight, take a vote in favor of implementing what's before you, do the right thing, and let's not have this be something that parents, grieving parents, have to stand in front of you and complain when an incident happens. Thank you.
Okay, next testifier.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Bondi, 2718 South 12th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska 68502. I am a parent. I have 2 children. Riley is a kindergartner at Saratoga. And like others who have spoken, I get emotional thinking about it. We want safety for our kids. We all do. And many of us feel like police officers, school resource officers, based on our history growing up, that they're there to protect us. But as others have stated, I haven't seen the evidence that says that school resource officers provide all these things that we hope that they will. And we have seen the evidence about bias and about increase for certain groups into the criminal justice system, which to me, it's concerning that we would have this with the hopes that we just don't happen to have the evidence, but that it is true that school resource officers provide the security that we all want for our kids. We hope that. Are we also hoping that the evidence against increased referrals to the criminal justice system for kids of color and for trans kids and for kids with disabilities, we're hoping that that's not going to happen here in Lincoln. So if we do go forward with the school resource officers, I appreciate in the memo of understanding that it says there is a review policy, a procedure. I appreciate, it sounds like community members will be involved. And my question is, what happens if the stuff in the evidence, we hope it isn't going to happen in Lincoln, but what if the bias does end up in our school systems? What if there is an increase in criminalization for these vulnerable populations? What happens with that memo of understanding? What happens with the school resource officers? I think that needs to be really clearly defined. Are we going to continue once this memo, I know there's reviews in place that it would need to be agreed upon, but what specifically happens if it's not working out? To me, the risk of kids having increased likelihood of criminalization and getting into our criminal justice system, it isn't worth it for this hope that we're going to get this protection that we haven't seen the evidence that we're going to get. Thank you.
Okay, next testifier.
Hello. I'm Cheryl Bullard, 2709 Kipling Circle in Lincoln, 68516. I'm a grandparent of a little girl that attends Rousseau Elementary School. I want to strongly show my support for the interlocal agreement and the MOU in the versions as they are presented today. We've come a long way over the last 4 months working on this issue. You've heard a lot of testimony from all 3 areas about the CLCs, the behavioral and the mental health issues, and SROs. I want to thank each of you for listening to our concerns and thoughts and incorporating many of them in the current versions of these 2 documents. I've presented in front of the council many times and primarily on the issue of the SROs. I fully support SROs, and I feel that the Lincoln Police Department has a proven record with the SROs all these years in our high schools, and we did have them in the middle schools as well for a while. As for data, yes, you can go out there and find negative data regarding the SROs, but you really need to look at the source of these reports, who wrote them, where they came from, and the date of this information. I want to digress just a little bit from what I've got written here. In terms of the lady that was just speaking, talking about, she wishes there was some data out there. as an evaluation consultant and not by far not an expert on evaluations, I really like the fact that in the MOU and the interlocal that there is going to be a report at the end of the first year about the SROs in particular. We'll have cold data, hard data that you can get from the number of referrals, you know, all the information there. But as an evaluation person, we also look at other ways of obtaining data, such as surveys and that kind of thing. And I hope that that is going to be incorporated with this report, that they survey the kids. Do you feel safer with a police officer in the schools? And I'd really like to see some pre and post. Create a survey for the kids the first week or two that they come to school before they've really been, you know, in the middle schools, been presented with an officer in the schools, and take cut an image at that point in time, how these kids feel about an officer coming in, how these kids feel about how safe they are right now in these schools, and then do it again in 12 months. And let's see if their impression has changed about having a police officer in the schools. That's one way that instead of just looking at cold numbers, you can get the feel. I call those are the warm feel-good numbers that you need when you're doing an evaluation of a program, especially one like this that's going to impact so many lives. Okay, let's see. Talking about the data, I want to say that a lot has changed in our schools and society over the past 10 years. And just look at the two shootings the last week. We had the one in Santa Fe, Texas, and the one in Dixon, Illinois. SROs did their job. They did the job that they were chosen for specifically. They did their job that they were specially trained for. They have all received special training. And our officers that are currently in the Lincoln Public High Schools are specially trained for this. They were hand-chosen for this. And the officers that they're going to choose for middle schools are going to go through that same training. Without them, these two shootings in these schools would have been a whole lot worse. Please pass this interlocal agreement today. Don't delay. Let's take action now. Protect our children and our schools. Thank you.
Next testifier. I believe, see, there's a gentleman behind you who is coming up.
Man at the pool of Bethesda. Every time I get there, someone steps in before me. I wish I could. I noticed some of us who testified, we talked about how hurt you are and what pain you feel. I'm the Reverend Michael W. Combs, pastor of the Mount Zion Baptist Church, 3301 North 56th Street. I wish I could share the pain that I have felt when members of my congregation and their children share their pain. Sometimes we only see evil that affects us. We only see evil that affects us. Racism tends not to affect whites. So whites tend not to feel that evil. That evil has driven this nation since its inception. And every black person standing in this room can get up and testify, not make up data, the evil that we have felt in our lives many, many times. And the second point I want to make is that throughout the history of this nation, racism, programs and policies that deal with racism have been sacrificed for political expedience because we now have killings in our schools. So we're going to forget all about racism. We're going to throw that under the bus. And I ask the question, where are the officers going to be stationed? Are they going to be in the front of the school where the persons with the guns enter? Or are they going to be summoned for mentoring and counseling? Where are they going to be? Where are they going to be? Where are they going to be stationed in the school? If they're doing counseling, they're doing mentoring, they will not be in the front of the school where they could originally, at the first point of attack, confront the gunman. They have to be summoned. That is what I heard with Parkland, in Parkland, Florida. And if my memory serves me correctly, that is also what happened in Santa Fe. If we're going to have them there, have them at the front door. And when school is in session, only have it such that persons can enter certain doors. Have the other doors locked so that only persons can exit out rather than gaining entrance. But we're not going to do that. Plus, I believe it's a cheap way of improving relationships between the police and the black community by placing them in school. And I asked the question, if we did a study and asked kids, how many of you want to skip math? I would guarantee you the vast majority of them would say, we can do without math as a 6th grader, as a 7th grader, and as an 8th grader. I suggest to you that we don't need to be asking our kids those kinds of questions. Our kids do not understand many times how racism functions and how it disadvantages them. They are not grown people. They don't know. They don't know. So are we going to do a study and ask them? Or do you want math? Do you want American history? Do you want to take foreign languages? We're not going to do that because we know better. And the second thing is, another point is that from my perspective, the MOU has not incorporated the strong and sharp objections of the community. And I know some persons say the community does not include black people.
1 minute.
We talk about the community, and I've read it in other places. The community, generally, when we talk about the community, we're talking about white people. We're not talking about black people. We are spoken of as groups in the community, but whites are the community. I suggest to you that we can do better. I believe we're better than this. And I really believe each one of us who is present now, we are better than this. And what training will the police officers have? What training? How are they going to be specified in terms of their training? Is it going to be the normal training? What is the training going to be? We have no information in terms of that. And all of us want us to take, I wish, I teach at the university. I wish the university would take my word that I am a great teacher. But guess what? They do an evaluation every semester because I'm always going to give myself the what? Benefit of the doubt.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Next testifier, please.
Hi, I'm Judy King, Judyking, 1261 Fall Creek Road, Lincoln. And I didn't prepare anything, but I trying to listen to what everyone was touching on, and I agree with everything that he said. And guns do kill kids. And I want to thank you all for the bump stock vote. I appreciate that, but we need more, and we need more of it. And with this situation, I think we need to further it besides having police in the school, even though I think Playmeister is great. I made the error of getting on my grandson's Facebook page and making a comment about a comment that he had made or something that he had showed about guns. He's a hunter. He loves hunting, and I grew up with a hunter family, and my brother loved to go out hunting every day he could. But I made the mistake of not agreeing with him on something on the Facebook page, and all of his friends started coming after me. And I finally got to the point with those kids that I said, can't we talk about this, without kind of hitting on each other and just have a good conversation, and that there's actually shooting going on at schools? I mean, you're sharp kids, what can we do to stop this, And they gave me some really great examples, so I should have printed them off. I mean, they're hunters, they shoot, and then it blended into a conversation with my kids, and gun owners, and we talked about everything that's going on right now. And I said, let's just sit down and talk about it. You know, what can we do to stop this? I mean, we all feel that it needs to be stopped, but there needs to be more done than just having police in the schools. I mean, it needs to have conversations and addressing people that are totally against you and on the different side. I mean, that's all I have to say, but
Thank you.
I just agree we need more than just the police in the schools.
Next testifier.
Good evening. It is evening now. I'm Eileen Durgan-Clinchard, and I've been here before, but I haven't given you any of my background. I have a PhD in adult education from the university here. I taught in the public schools for 30-some years. I came from Virginia when it was segregated from all-white schools, and I lived there the year, excuse me, I lived in Norfolk the year that they closed the high schools for a semester rather than integrate. And if you can imagine that. And then from that climate, I moved to Omaha, Nebraska. The schools I was assigned to was Lake School, which is at 20th and Lake, which is the heart of the black community. So it was an interesting experience for me, and I loved it. But we were an old school. They didn't have a lunchroom, so that if you brought your lunch, you could get milk. Otherwise, you went to the vending machines at the laundromat across the street. So I know of minority kids when they're the majority, and we got along just fine. My major point is that, along with others, is that this MOU is a great step. You definitely need one, but it needs to be more precise, more specific, and listing things. Somebody commented that, in fact, I don't want to repeat the comments that people have already said, but yes, the vagueness is unhappy. And I think someone earlier referred to you could get on the internet for 5 minutes and get a wealth of articles, and they would be pro, con, a variety. One in particular that I found is what they call a local implementation rubric, and this is by the U.S. Departments of Education and the DOJ. And they've designed this, what they call the Secure Implementation Rubric, which is for school districts, schools, and other places. They give you action steps, checklists to start, places to go. The things that I really liked about it was because they came up with a specific kind of language that I would like to see in the MOU. One of the things, draft an MOU together with stakeholder group. And the stakeholder group are the people who are using it, the people who will be living with it and the questions that they have. And that also means the parents, the family, school staff, community. Obviously, you can't get everybody in, but you can get more than you have now, I think. Make the language applicable and accessible to all the audiences, because this goes home as well. Include language that explicitly prohibits SROs from involvement in entering enforcing school codes of conduct. That's for the teachers to do. And the thing that I've heard several times in these, because I've been at the school board as well as here, is that there are more referrals than police contact. I think, Mr. Camp, you said that. And I've heard that before, and it seems to be true. So why is that? There is work that I think the Lincoln Public Schools needs to do on that score, where we're talking implicit bias. I also worked, after I retired from public schools and getting my PhD, as a diversity trainer for the A World of Difference program, which is run by the Anti-Defamation League. There were things there, we are not born biased and prejudiced. We learn those things as we go along. And as a white person, I'm part of the system.
1 minute.
And I have to continually unlearn. And I will be unlearning all my life. Even though I think I've come pretty far, I still, that happened. So I would strongly recommend that you do something with the MOU that builds into it, maybe not the specificity that I would like to see now, but a date positive, I think you use that term in the meetings here, a date positive that this will be reviewed, not just reviewed, but revamped and given more specific language. Teachers need to know exactly when they can refer. A kid pushing another kid is not an assault. But if they're the wrong color or they've been active, really they're a big kid and a little kid, you can get some false impressions and the false referring. So we have to be very, very careful about that. And to be careful, we need to be specific, we need to be trained. Training needs to be built in. Thank you. Do I have to sign anything?
Yes, please sign in.
Sign. Next testifier, please.
And thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Emily Killam, 9501 Oakville Road, Lincoln, Nebraska 68526. And I just really want to, reiterate some of the problems with the MOU, but what I don't see in the MOU with all the changes that have been made, and a lot of them have been very good changes, and I appreciate, I think both, folks at the school board and you folks listening to what people have brought up and people's concerns and really trying to incorporate those. But what I still don't see in the MOU is accountability. So I see data collection, and we had some speaking about, we can find all this data, and we have found the data, and LPD collects data, and LPS collects data. The problem is the data already shows that implicit bias. And so we know it's there. We're not saying that you're not collecting the data. I think what folks are saying is you are collecting the data. You know that there are problems, and what we're not hearing is people saying it out loud. And it's offensive to say, stop responding if the perpetrator is of a different race. That would fix the quota. That's actually offensive. That's not what anyone is saying. What people are saying is, look, the way we can fix this is by saying out loud that all of us carry implicit bias, every single one of us. And it doesn't just mean blacks, and it doesn't just mean Hispanics, and it doesn't just mean people with disabilities, but it means bias against what we believe about a victim, what we believe about a perpetrator. Implicit bias training covers all of those things. And if we can't say out loud, we have a problem, then we can never come to a solution. And so as we rush through this, and forgive me, I drop my kids off at school every day as well, and I worry about their safety, but actually I don't worry about their safety in that I trust that our schools are keeping them safe, and they actually are. But at the same time, we cannot be in such a hurry to do that we make the schools and the city less safe for somebody else's kid, because we just made it safer for my kids. So I just really want to see some language about accountability, and what are we going to do with the data that we have? How are we going to fix our bias problems that we have and that we know we have? So thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify? Please come forward.
May I say to the audience, several of you testified, and I don't think you signed in, and it really helps our clerk to have your names.
Yeah.
And we've got pink sheets up here, and you can sign those after you testify, but.
Okay.
And you can sign them after the meeting. Please go ahead.
Kenneth Albron, 4441 Hillside. I'm here to lend my support for the interlocal as it is. Hopefully we can move forward with it. Part of Parents United group. I've been to a lot of meetings, seen a lot of testimony, and I just think it's time. We got to get some safer schools, and this is the way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify? Please come forward.
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. I would like to remind my black friends that white women have been discriminated also against by society for thousands of years, and that we can all come together and recognize that race is not the bottom line for any of us. I want to congratulate the council for listening to the public who did not want a new taxing authority. And I want to congratulate the public who rose up to stop a new taxing authority. We hope that their awareness will continue against a taxing authority that is out of control. The MUS outline is vague. It is full of general statements, and it is not transparent enough excuse me, for public confidence. For many years, the police have been used as scapegoats to put fear into African Americans and into white people alike by letting them have too much power or too little power in society. African Americans were not protected from vigilantes and were lynched, and white people were beaten with rubber hoses and such when arrested by overzealous police when they had not been convicted. Old ways and beliefs die hard, and we have lingering fears because of the past history, even though we believe we are more enlightened. Without specific wording about the boundaries in this MOU, it's a slippery slope. Where will the SRO be housed? When will they move from their assigned places to LPS staff requests? If a youth hits another youth in the hall during class break, who is the authority? Both are infractions of school law and public law. Not every incident will have a distinct assigned authority, and who will decide then? We hope a more complete delineation of authority will be drawn over the summer and over the next 9 months or so to minimize the possibility of an ambiguous situation. The more distinct boundaries, the better off for everyone will be. Youth will be more comfortable, and the public will be too. Really, I believe that having metal detectors would be the best way to go because it is not concerned with emotion. It's black and white, and ambiguity does not reign. But I think that's already been decided against by the council and by the public. So let us hope that this will be a good start to a difficult problem and that rationality will reign.
Would anyone else like to speak? Please come forward.
Good evening. So I carry implicit bias, and you've heard me say in every public forum, every time I have an opportunity to talk, that disproportionality exists in every facet of the criminal justice system. That does not immediately equate into explicit bias or discrimination, but there is accountability, and there needs to be, and that accountability is when someone acts, and if it's a member of our agency, if we act with discrimination, there is accountability and there should be. I agree, we need much more than police and schools. Throughout this process, the Lincoln Police Department has emphasized that any and all improvements to the safety of our schools must be multifaceted. There is no singular solution. The addition of 6 school resource officers and an investigator dedicated to threat assessment is only one part. Enhancing the opportunity for our kids to have the availability for mental and behavioral health services and access to safe and productive programming at community learning centers are equally important. The interlocal agreement in front of you tonight is not symbolic. It's a culmination of hard work by many of the staff at the mayor's office, leadership at Lincoln Public Schools, the city attorney's office, all of those who are here tonight and are part of the community learning centers, by the director of Lincoln Parks and Rec, and most importantly, by everybody in this room who has sacrificed time away from their families and other things that they could be doing to share input with you. It's about compromise between leaders on governing boards in our community who serve the citizens of Lincoln and our students in the Lincoln Public Schools. That's you. It's about listening to the input and perspectives of so many who have voiced their thoughts on the varying components of this document. The Interlocal Cooperation Act for Safe and Successful Kids is about partners moving beyond discussion and working collaboratively to initiate change that will make a positive impact. This initiative showcases a willingness to take ownership and responsibility for the safety and success of our kids by everybody in this room tonight. And your vote and support will make a difference in the lives of the kids in our community, providing them a chance to succeed. And I truly believe that your vote will put in practice an example for other communities around the country to follow.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Please come forward. Welcome.
I'm Dwayne Mays. My address is 2711 South 74th Street here in Lincoln. I hadn't planned to speak to you this evening, but I'm compelled to. Because I hope, but I believe in my innermost parts tell me that you've already decided what you're going to do. And what we're doing is just a waste of time. It's just passing the time, a pacify of the community, of those of us who have some concerns. When you talk about students, are you talking about all of the students? Are you talking about all of the students? Are you talking about my grandchildren? They mean a lot to me. But it appears that they don't mean anything to you. Because if they did, you would be concerned that when you place resource officers in the school, you jeopardize a certain segment of of the population of that school. Yes, I believe in the police force, very much so. But I believe that the teaching and the training of our students belongs to the school system. That's why we pay the big dollars. Are you going to assume that? You're underpaid to do that. I don't believe. Training our students belong to the school system. This is not training our students. It's training us. Protecting the students. Tell me, how long does it take the police to answer a call at any high school, any school in this community? How long does it take? 2 minutes? 3 minutes? If it takes 5 minutes, something is wrong. We've been told that. So, why do I need to spend all of that money for a resource officer in the school if it takes them that long to get from the other side of the school? Doesn't it? To figure out what's going on. So what are we doing? Why are we puzzling this? If you decided, if it takes 3 to 4 minutes for the police officer to get there to the school, and surely if there's an emergency, it's probably going to be more than one. It's one resource officer, isn't it? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? If this doesn't work, what are you going to do? will you come back and ask the people, well, so that didn't work, it cost me $1 million, but that didn't work. I need $5 million. And that won't work either. Because the problem is a problem that moves back and forth. You can't put your finger on it. Because if you could, you would have done it already. But the decision that you're making is very important. It affects my grandchildren. I know it makes you feel good if you have a resource officer there because you feel safe. But it doesn't make me feel safe. It doesn't make me feel that my grandchildren are safe. Because you haven't done anything to protect them. What are you going to do?
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to testify? We can now move into voting on these resolutions.
All right, item 5A, approving Steve-O's Lounge as a Keno satellite at 110 West Fletcher, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second. Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 5B, text amendment 18005, amending Title III Design Standards for Zoning Regulations, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Approving a contract between the city and Schneider Electric, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Discussion? John?
I asked a lot of questions on this matter, and I've tried to research it. There are just some unanswered questions. I would like to move that we place this item and the next item, 5D, on pending till June 4th. And I think there's some information that city staff didn't have with them tonight that I would like to see and get answers to so that we're more assured of what these projections are. I guess I need a second to my motion.
Second.
So you're wanting to continue public hearing to June 4th, or action only?
Continue public hearing.
Okay. It's moved and seconded to continue with action and public hearing to June 4th. Discussion?
So I just, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, I just have a few questions I want to answer on the CIP too and the internal funding. So I appreciate Councilman Camp bringing this. Probably 1 week would do it, except we're not going to be here on Monday. So we're going to have to wait 2 weeks.
June
Thank
4th.
you.
Okay. Lyrian?
I was just hoping John could elaborate a little bit on the specific information he would still like to see, just to understand.
Well, I heard a lot of verbal comments, but, and for example, toward the end there, our finance director wasn't here to answer, and the fact that we're borrowing from our own funds, being our own banker, concerns me. And then Mr. Ularek talked about things, but he didn't have the documentation to back them up, and I'd just like to see that.
Okay. Further discussion?
And this is for 5C and D, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 5E, the interlocal agreement with LPS, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Lyrian, seconded by Jane. Discussion?
I'd like to move motion to amend number 2, which introduces the most revised version of the interlocal.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved by, this is the substitute. Moved by Lyrian, seconded by Cindy. Discussion? Please Go ahead.
Excuse me, yeah, I just want to clarify that the motion to amend number 2 substitutes motion to amend number 2 attachment A.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Now, discussion on the main motion. Cindy, then Carl.
Thank you. Clearly, these last few months, we've all been concerned about the safety of the children, which is so important to all government officials. And I just appreciate the work that we've done here as a body and also with the school board. I'm pleased that we were able to do this through an interlocal. We have the money, now we have the vehicle, and I'm fully supportive of this interlocal. Thank you.
Carl.
Thank you. I want to thank our community, people that have showed up here, people we've heard from over these last few months. I want to thank my colleagues, working together, everybody here, as well as working with members of the Lincoln Board of Education, various community organizations, parents, students, all of which is, I think, geared toward trying to make schools safer for our kids. That's what we want to see. I understand the concerns about the SROs, but I think that makes our schools safer. And also recognize the importance of mental health treatment and recognizing that 80% or more of the incarcerated people in our jails and prisons are individuals that have some level of mental health issues that they're dealing with. And it's so critical that they have the resources to deal with those things. And as we've all experienced, our CLCs, the Community Learning Centers, realizing the great resources that they provide to our kids, and even to the parents of those kids, and things that they help them to be able to do in finding jobs and learning language skills. All of those things are so important. I guess the last thanks I want to offer is an important one, and that is Mayor Beitler has championed these issues, has long sought a partnership between the city and LPS, and want to thank him for that. So, Mr. Chair, as you like to say, this is a good thing. I think it is a good thing.
We'll go Jane, and then Benny.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Well, you know, the community has been essential in helping us dialogue about what matters to them, their very real concerns about all of our children. And Pastor Combe, I think, said it better. We have to do better. We can do better. We must do better to protect all of our children. And you know, this is a very comprehensive approach. It's never easy, and the dialogue has been good for our community. But we have to continue the dialogue. We have to continue to talk about real concerns, about the biases that have been going on for generation after generation. We must continue to invest in these programs that will help all of our children succeed, from the community learning centers to making sure that we have mental health specialists to help those kids in crisis so that they can develop the coping skills so that they can succeed. And yes, we do need to have additional SROs to protect all of our children, but we can be better, and we must do better. With the memorandum of understanding that we've had so many folks come and testify, that is a document that is a fluid document that does need improvements. And that's why the interlocal board that will be formed as soon as we approve these agreements will reach out to the stakeholders, to reach out to the families so that we can incorporate their concerns, so we can be a better learning community, so that we can be proactive on making sure that these kids of color and where racial biases occur and implicit biases occur,
We all can be better, and we can improve. And that means training. That means training for the teachers. That means training for LPS administrators. That means additional training for our SRO officers. We have to be better as a community because we can move forward. And the goal is to keep all of our kids safe and protected and making sure that they have brighter futures. So I agree. This is a good thing, and I'm really proud of our community for having this dialogue. But with the MOU, it will continue. There are goals. There is accountability. Chief Blymeister said that the best. He holds his officers accountable. He wants them to be better, and they will be better. And with additional training, they will be better. So this is a good thing.
Benny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the sake of brevity and for the sake of time, I'm not going to repeat the things my colleagues said. I agree with what they say. I'm excited about funding for the community learning centers. I'm excited about funding for mental health services. I'm excited about funding that will help our young people become better adults. I am also concerned about some of the issues of disparity in our community, and I know the MOU is a good start. And we as a community have to remain vigilant and have to hold the city accountable, the police department accountable, the school board accountable, and teachers in our classrooms. We can do better, as my colleagues and people from the audience said. We all have to get involved, and we all have to work together to make it better for everybody. But I look forward to starting that process tonight and making schools better for now on.
John?
Well, we've said a lot of things here, and I agree with what my colleagues have said. I think the biggest thing in summarizing is I want to thank the community first, because you in this room, as well as all the other members of our community, have contacted us, and we have listened. And I also then, in addition to the community, want you to know how much I appreciate the way the Lincoln Public Schools and the school board have responded, as well as this council. There's been a lot of interaction among my colleagues, and they've helped respond to your concerns in the community. And finally, I'd just like to say that we're now at a point where I think it's time to commit, do something rather than omit and do nothing.
Lyrian?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who deserve thanks, and starting with the mayor, who had the leadership along with the superintendent and our community partners to put forward this initiative. It's hard to go first, and that's what they did. And as we received public input, this initiative evolved. But what's impressive is the priority on improving safety and security for our children, all of our children, has remained the focus. And this is a new era for the council and the school board in terms of working together. This new interlocal board will bring us together on a regular basis, and I would suggest that that is a new era of accountability. Along with all the things detailed in the MOU and in the interlocal about annual reports and evaluation processes, a lot of improvements brought forward by you and added. You will have a panel of elected officials sitting before you, listening to you in future public hearings as well. And I suspect if you're not happy with our actions, you know, our jobs will be on the line, as they should be. This new priority on a multifaceted approach that supports the good work of the nonprofits who have been working for decades in our schools and after school to provide social services, behavioral and mental health services, and the kinds of mentoring and safe, positive spaces after school through community learning centers. It's important that the public sector steps up to support them. And as someone who used to run a school-based Boys and Girls Club, I'm particularly pleased that the focus of this initiative is on community learning centers. So this is not the end, it's the beginning. There will be more to come, and we need you to be a part of that every step of the way.
Okay. I'll begin by expressing my gratitude to everyone involved in our community, but special thanks to the school board for their willingness to work with us, and very special thanks to both Cindy and Lyrian for the work they've done. Thank you. This is a good thing. Please call the roll.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then are public hearing ordinances, second reading. Item 6A, Street and Alley Vacation 17004, vacating the Ash Street right-of-way located east of Colonial Drive and west of South 33rd Street.
Good evening, David Carey with the Planning Department. I bring forward to you probably a well-received simple item for this evening. This is a straightforward proposal for vacation of right-of-way. This is the former Ash Street that has gone forward in front of the Planning Commission on the consent agenda, was approved 9-0. The applicant is here in case there are some questions. The owner of the parcel that would purchase a portion of this right-of-way onto the back of, or on the back side of their lot has paid the identified value of this property, so it is ready to be put forward to you for a vote and a hearing today. There are no easements needed to be retained over this property, and I will answer any questions that you have for this item.
Questions?
Thank you.
Okay, we can move on.
Okay.
Well, excuse me, does anyone want to testify on this? Can't imagine so, but go ahead. All right.
All right, that concludes our public hearing, and we can move into the voting session with ordinances third reading. Item 7A, Street and Alley Vacation 18001, vacating an approximately 2.28 acre portion of the former Yankee Hill Road right-of-way located at South 84th and Yankee Hill Road, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Benny, seconded by Cindy. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 7B is authorizing the sale of city-owned property at 3275 Hitchcock Street, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Jane. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 7C is authorizing the sale of city-owned property located at 1420 North 27th Street and 2716 and 2718 Star Streets, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Moved by Benny, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 7D, authorizing the sale of city-owned property located at 1425 and 1447 North 27th Streets, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Benny, seconded by Jane. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next are ordinances and resolutions for action only. Item 8A, approving a memorandum of understanding between the city and LPS, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Carl?
Yeah, I'm sorry that the room kind of cleared out because there was some really important testimony that we've heard on the MOU and questioning whether we're listening. And I think one thing that I heard tonight that I think is so important is accountability and making certain that LPD, LPS, that we're accountable for what's being done. And one important piece is that there is an annual report. An annual report that sits on somebody's desk isn't going to do any good. There has to be a process involved where a community group gets together and is able to sift through the information that we get from that report. So I just would hope that that's something that might be able to be implemented as part of this. Thank you.
Okay, Jane?
Well, I want to echo all the things that Carl has said, but because it does incorporate best practices so that all students are treated impartially and without bias by the SROs, LPS staff, in alignment with applicable city and LPS equity policies. But it's also going to be utilizing best practices for training and oversight with the goal of reducing disproportionality. But most importantly, it will continue to include the community and the stakeholders in our community for a regular dialogue to keep improving and to hold us accountable for achieving those program goals. Relevant data is going to be collected, just like it is collected now, but they're going to be criticized. Is this the correct data points that we must be reflecting on? Is this how we can evaluate our success? And we will be held accountable on an annual basis. And so, moving forward, we continue to show improvements, but we will continue to be held accountable.
Okay, anyone else? Please call the roll.
We do have a motion to amend number 2 on this one to accept the substitute attachment A. We still need to move forward with that.
Second.
Okay, moved by Jane, seconded by Lyrian. Okay, please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
On the main motion.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then is item 8B, resolution transferring funds from contingency to pay for 6 additional recruits, introduced by Lamb.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Cindy, seconded by Carl. Discussion.
I would just remind the council that we adopted a motion to amend last week that basically put the figures in. This is just, this is a resolution that allows money to pay for those recruits to be part of the July training class that we talked about in order to backfill so that we can put school resource officers in the school by January 2019.
Okay, Lyrian?
For 7, the
Right.
motion to amend is for 7 officers. So the description's no longer
Yes.
current.
Includes
To
6
include the threat
officers
assessment.
and threat assessment. Okay. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next is item 8C, interlocal agreement with LPS to include the city's commitment to share funding, introduced by Lamb.
Mr. Chair, in light of the fact that we passed an interlocal, I'd like to move to withdraw item 8C, which is 18R88.
Second?
Moved by Cindy, excuse me, yes, and it's getting late. Seconded by Jane. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 8D, resolution calling for an amendment to the interlocal with LPS to provide 6 school resource officers, introduced by Lamb.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the same motion to withdraw item 8D, 18R89, in light of the interlocal that we just voted to approve.
Second?
Moved by Cindy, seconded by Jane. Discussion, please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 8E is the creation of a JPA, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Carl?
Yes. Mr. Chair, thank you. I would like to move that we withdraw this item. We've done something else.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird? Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Finally, item 8F, the agreement between the city and LPS, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
Carl?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we also withdraw this item.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Cindy. Please call the roll.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Thank you, everyone.
Excuse me.
Well, we're coming to that.
Our resolutions on first reading are items 9A through G.
Mr. Chair, may I be heard?
Yes?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would like to move that item 9G 18R111 be removed from and withdrawn from our docket. Excuse me, from our agenda.
Moved by Cindy, seconded by John. Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, as was stated in the paper, this is about a topic over which the City Council has no authority. And at this point in time, this is an item that is in the purview of the federal government. It is divisive for our community, and I don't want to go down this road. I think that this is a bad policy to start with. As the newspaper reported, this basically has become a platform for a campaign, and that has no place here in this body. And I have been approached by a number of folks about entering resolutions also to direct certain actions of the state legislature or of the federal government. And I really don't feel like we should go down that road.
So your motion is to withdraw this item?
That's correct. Motion to withdraw.
Benny?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Councilwoman Lim, I appreciate the things you're saying, and I will respectfully disagree at this time. The parties that are affected by this resolution, the parties this resolution intends to give a chance to speak, would like to have an opportunity to come to a public hearing and speak. We had one scheduled. It got kind of sidetracked because of the resolution. I think giving our community members an opportunity to have a public hearing and speak would be appropriate. I do recognize and want to say, acknowledge all the points you brought forward, and perhaps after a public hearing, we might should address those again.
Jane?
Well, I appreciate this opportunity to address this on the first reading. I have to tell you that there is a recognition in this resolution that we simply do not have the authority on the City Council to make amendments or fix what's going on in our state, in our city, and in our communities about the deferred action childhood arrival recipients in our community. We don't have the authority. We recognize that. But as a body, we do have the authority to make recommendations to our elected officials. I can tell you, as a county board member, we have done that in the past. We have written letters, we have passed resolutions encouraging our state legislators to take action on things that impact those in our community, that we see firsthand how it impacts in the county. We see firsthand how these issues that are going on the federal level impact those in our community. I too have been approached by so many of our constituents in our city that what's going on the federal level impacts their lives. You know, the young people who are DACA recipients are living in fear. They live in fear. There are so many uncertainties that swirl around them and their families about their future. You know, these young kids have qualified to be able to work, to be able to get jobs, and now to be able to drive in our communities. They are productive members of our community. These young people deserve a right to have their very real concerns heard. They are a part of our community. We have educated these amazing, talented, capable young people. They have every right to have their views heard in our community. We have invested in their education. They are a big part of our community. They want an opportunity to have their very real concerns about what's going on in their lives and their families' lives be heard. We represent them. They have an opportunity to be heard. We recognize that these are just recommendations to our federal leaders because it's in their jurisdiction. It is not in our jurisdiction. We've done this before. And I want to address the concern about a campaign. You know, I'm a member of this community. I have constituents who approach me on all different levels. And I like many others, have a right to speak out on things that are of a very real concern to them. And so I'm a little bit resentful of the comment that you think it's always very self-serving. That's not why I'm running, and that is certainly not why I'm sitting up here and doing the job that each and every one of us do and go out in the community and talk to the people that this impacts.
John?
This is in the city council's history, my 19 years, now going on 20 today. We've not done this. We have, as individuals, supported or sent recommendations to state and federal agencies, and that's where it should be. And it can be done on the campaign trail, it can be done by us individually. But for this body to do that is not appropriate. It's out of our bounds of jurisdiction, and I have no problem with there being a dialogue, but it should not be before this body, nor should this body adopt any resolution that would affect what another body actually has the jurisdiction over.
Other comments?
If I may, just, thank you. Do I get a response? Since my motion, thank you. I just wanted to respond that the people of this community have every right to come up to this podium and express their views. Tonight was one of the nights where they could have done that if this had not been placed on the agenda. There are two times every month that citizens can come forward and be heard, and often we do hear those things that are not on our agenda or not appropriate to put on our agenda. And so I appreciate the people's right to be heard. And as Councilman Shob said, I think that there were probably people that were going to come last week, as I heard, but they were cut off because this was put on the agenda. So I'm not trying to cut off anybody's right to speak or to be heard on things that affect them in our community. But as Councilman Camp said, this is unprecedented, and it's inappropriate for us to be voting on a letter of your own or a letter with several council members. Might be a better option. So,
Other comments? Okay, before I call the roll, I view this as a cynical abuse of this council. The purpose of it is to inject life into a lackluster campaign. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Mr. Chair, could, a moment, please. We're voting
to remove
it. To withdraw.
Thank you very much.
Eskridge?
No.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb?
yes.
Raybold?
No.
Shob?
No.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Motion failed.
Motion lost. 3-4. No.
Motion lost, 4-3.
Motion lost, 4-3.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make another motion to put this on pending and to be brought up on our June 11th meeting.
Second.
Moved to put it on June 11th. I have asked for this because I'm not going to be in town on the 4th of June. I'm going to be visiting grandchildren, and I'd like to be a part of the discussion and the voting. Larry?
I would just like to point out that it is inappropriate, according to Robert's Rules of Order, to speak to a member's motivations for introducing or speaking on an item. And I think that needs to stop for the sake of our relationships and the community.
We're talking about the...
I'm talking about the discussion of this item. This is still,
That vote was taken on that. We're now talking about delaying this to June 11th.
but I think it's very important, as a point of order, that we stop speaking to people's motivations. That is inappropriate, and it says so in Robert's Rules.
Okay, discussion on delay.
I have something to say.
Mhm.
I too will be on travel on June 11th. So I would not support a delay in this motion. And I concur. I have been very offended by Councilwoman Lamb's comments, and certainly your comments as a chair, Roy. I think they're very inappropriate and out of line.
Okay, Cindy?
I quoted from the newspaper. So the quote from the newspaper said that this resolution gives her, referring back to the councilwoman, an opportunity to discuss a public venue for talking about the issue, which is a part of her campaign platform. I was reading that right from the paper, and you were quoted right in between those two. So it's just inappropriate.
Well, it was on the radio as I came to this meeting out of Omaha.
Yeah. So, in any case, I would ask that we, and perhaps I'd bring an amendment to delay this to June 18th so that both council members can be back in order to hear public testimony and vote on this issue.
I'd accept that friendly amendment.
So there's a delay with public hearing until the 18th. When the
Correct.
full body will be back in session.
Correct.
Correct.
Voting and hearing, public hearing. Okay. On the motion to delay with public hearing until the 18th of June, please call the roll.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Our ordinances first reading are items 10A through D. Our pending list date certain is item 1829. I'm sorry, Bill 1829. Pending list are items 12A through C. Anyone wishing to address the council on a matter not on this agenda and not planned to appear on a future agenda may do so at this time, since it is an open microphone session.
Please come forward if you'd like to say something.
Good evening, Chairman Christensen and members of the council. I am Ed Holloway, K0RPT. I'm 8310 Sandalwood Drive. I come to you with three hats on tonight. One is the American Radio Relay League's Nebraska Section Emergency Coordinator and the Nebraska Section Emergency Coordinator for Lancaster County and the President of the Lincoln Amateur Radio Club. And I'm here to offer up some positive for you this evening. Annually, we hold an emergency preparedness event out at Mahoney, and we thank you for allowing us there. Mr. Schob, yes? I think I've met Councilman Lamb. Were you there last year?
I don't think so.
I didn't get an opportunity. I know there was somebody else. This is an event that we hold, like I said, annually to exercise our skills in emergency communications. We work very closely with Jim Davidsaver in the Lancaster County Emergency Operations Center, where Reynolds Davis, I'm sure his name is there, since 1973 has built this system. And in his retirement 2 years ago, and my 20 years ago, the first time I seen John on the board here, I've been appointed to replace him 2 years ago. And so we train our folks, and the last, 2 weeks ago, we had a call out. 41 of our certified spotters were assuming points on the hilltop to protect Lincoln and Lancaster County. And this is a part of that. We'll have multiple stations up, 4 of them. There's what called Get on the Air station, where we'd invite you to come out, and if you've never experienced Morse code, or you've never experienced keying up a radio and talking to somebody in Bolivia that you can't understand because they don't speak English, but yet you both know how to go da-da-da-it. You can have that conversation. We'd invite you to join us for dinner. My committee chair folks, activity committee reports that there will be more than enough food. Public service committee, Michael over here, and Justin. And Justin will have a few things to say here. I appointed Justin a while ago because he's got the power of gab. And so we'll let him take it over.
Good evening. My name is Justin Williamson. I reside at 2150 South 9th Street. That's in the Irvingdale neighborhood here in Lincoln. First off, thank y'all for allowing us to come out and speak this evening. I'd also like to give a credit to each of y'all for your patience and understanding and listening this evening. It's a very tough topic that y'all dealt with, so I just want to say to that. My position, I serve as a assistant emergency coordinator for the Nebraska Amateur Radio Emergency Service here in Lancaster County. I am also the public relations chairman for the the Lincoln Area Radio Club, as well as social media chairman. Additionally, just to give some backfill on this, I'm also a retired Texas deputy sheriff. And so I understand the necessary for emergency communication. the skills that will be being practiced at Field Day, which of course will be out at Mahoney Park at 70th and Fremont, June 23rd through 24th, will just serve to shore those skills up. The Lincoln Amateur Radio Club has responded many times in the community, as y'all are aware. I believe it was 20 years ago the 911 system went down.
No, it was about 7 years ago.
7 years ago, my apologies. And at that time, the Lincoln Amateur Radio Club stepped up to help provide extra communications, extra points around town to help people stay in communication with the Lincoln Fire Rescue and with the Lincoln Police Department. Additionally, as Ed alluded to, we had 41 go out the other night. You probably don't remember the storm because it was supposed to be really bad. And then, as much as I know some local meteorologists will get mad at me for saying it, the Lincoln Dome went into effect and broke it up before anything got to us. So again, we would like to invite you out to see a little bit of what we do. Of course, we do provide a great service to the community. We've recently helped with the Lincoln Marathon. I was down at 40th and Sheridan my first year to experience that. That was a great experience. Additionally, other things include the market-to-market relay and the Cornhusker State Games. I have extended to each one of you a personal invitation. Once our mail goes up to Omaha on its little field trip and comes back to Lincoln, I'm sure that you will be receiving that here at the Chambers. And again, I ask that you come out, join us for dinner. If you're so inclined, you can even join us for breakfast on Sunday morning. So thank you all very much.
And you can even stay out there.
Just when's the event, in case the ponies don't run?
June 23rd and 24th.
Okay, thank you.
And it's an overnight deal, so you're welcome to stay overnight. I'll be there all night long for the protection and security of our equipment. And for anybody, we've got some testing sessions going on. 2 years ago when I was elected president, we adopted an old school, take it back old school type of format. And so instead of just sending you a letter, we want to come out and personally invite you. And would welcome you all to come see us. There it is right there. So,
Good time was had by me.
yeah, well, come on back out again. So thank you so much for hearing us, and any other questions we'd be happy to answer.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank y'all. Have a good evening.
Would anyone else like to testify this evening?
Looks like it's over.
Are you gonna?
He's with me.
Okay.
Sir, I'd move for adjournment and also wish everyone a very good Memorial holiday weekend and safe travels if that so be the case of your recognition.
Second.
Adjournment's moved by John, seconded by Cindy. Call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
We are adjourned.